Chapter 1852. Hijichu's expression was a little strange. Gunyenji caught a glimpse of his expression and quickly said, "Did you remember something?" Hijichu got up and left. He returned to his room and brought his laptop over. "Let me show you something." He opened his laptop, entered the biological and electronic passwords, and entered an encrypted folder. Gunyenji looked away from him as he entered the password. She smiled sheepishly and said, "Young Master what is it? Do I have the authority to see it?" Hijichu's fingers flew and he opened a document. "It's almost time to decrypt it. You can take a look." Gunyenji was really curious. Her nimble eyes quickly glanced at Hijichu's screen and she was suddenly stunned. "This is the minutes of the high-level meeting from decades ago." Hijichu nodded and sat next to Gunyenji. He rested his chin on one hand and said coldly, "It was at this high-level secret meeting that the policy of openness was decided. There were a total of 8 people at the meeting." Gunyenji frowned. "That's not right. Shouldn't there be 7 people with such high authority? Who was the extra person?" Hijichu sneered sarcastically and said, "If you hadn't discovered Lorraine's connection with Qin Bei and Qin Yaoguang, I think this important clue would never have been known." Gunyenji shrank her neck guiltily. Her father, Lu Jin, should have taken the blame. Lu Jin knew that the Qin orphanage was secretly colluding with the Lorraine group, but he had never mentioned it to the He family. He hadn't even mentioned it to anyone. If Hijichu asked her how she knew the Qin family was related to Lorraine, she really wouldn't know how to answer. Fortunately, Hijichu didn't continue asking. Instead, he pointed at the important document and said, "Look, who's the 8th person?" Gunyenji couldn't care less about avoiding suspicion. She quickly leaned over and looked at the list of attendees. When she saw the last line, Gunyenji's eyes widened and she stuttered. "Lorraine the Third. He actually attended such a high-level meeting? He was an American through and through." This didn't make sense. The smile on Hijichu's face became even more sarcastic. "That's not all. The United Nations Population Fund and the Development Agency are involved in the entire open plan. And Lorraine III was the plenipotentiary representative of the United Nations Entrance Fund and the Development Agency. He is the only foreigner who has attended such a high-level meeting in our country." "Why?" Gunyenji blurted out angrily. "Why?" "Because he has money." Hijichu said faintly, "You don't know how much our predecessors wanted money back then." Gunyenji. "Actually, we also crave money." Gunyenji didn't think much of it. "But a gentleman loves money and he takes it in the right way. You can't discriminate between right and wrong. If you can earn money, then just treat it as me providing for you." Hijichu nodded solemnly. "Yes, that's right. But it took our country decades to understand this truth." Gunyenji didn't know what else to say. She changed the topic and said excitedly, "I understand. Did this Lorraine attend the high-level meeting and find out about the country's open plan? Then he leaked the secret to that old bastard Qin Bei? He was the one who suggested that place." Hijichu flipped through the meeting minutes. "Look, this place is clearly remembered. He suggested this place because although it was in the south, it was adjacent to H City, which was very developed at the time. It also had a natural port and was very suitable for developing foreign trade. I have to say, this person's eyes are very sharp." "Of course it's sharp." Gunyenji didn't think much of it. First of all, he's an old capitalist with over 100 years of history. Second of all, it was originally a bait with poison. It all depends on whether you take the bait or not. He used this method to make the Qin family rich without leaving a trace, Hijichu said coldly. Hijichu said coldly, "Even my grandfather, my father, and my mother didn't discover his relationship with the Qin family. Naturally, they didn't discover anything wrong with the Qin family's first pot of gold." Gunyenji nodded. "I can imagine that when Lorraine informed Qin Bei to buy the land, he must have been very secretive. They've been in contact since before the country was founded, so they must have their own special communication channels." Hijichu closed the documents and slammed the computer shut. He sneered. After the country was founded, the country's dictatorship cut off the connection between foreign capital and domestic agents. Also, financial controls were strict at that time, so foreign financial groups couldn't possibly give any funds to domestic companies. If they did, they would have been targeted by the country's financial institutions. "So this is the only path he can take," Gunyenji said emotionally. "But to be honest, when he's able to reach such a high level, he can easily make his subordinates rich with just a few words. To him, money is no longer important. He wants something else." Hijichu's gaze fell on Gunyenji's face. His gaze was unreadable and contained a faint sense of oppression. Gu Nianji avoided his gaze and said sarcastically, "Of course he wants to contribute to the evolution of mankind?" Hijichu couldn't help holding her hand and asked nervously, "Lorraine really didn't do anything to you, right? Your DNA?" Gu Nianji quietly broke free from Hijichu's hand and smoothed her hair back. She smiled. "I'm so powerful, so how could Lorraine beat me? Of course he didn't get my DNA. But would Qin Beiyoi and the others let you go?" Hijichu knew Gu Nianji wasn't telling the truth, or maybe she only told a part of the truth and left out the rest. But he didn't pursue the matter. If Gu Nianji was willing to tell him, she would tell him. If she didn't want to tell him now, there was no point in forcing her. It was laughable that he only understood Gu Nianji's temperament after experiencing so much. Gu Nianji looked at Hijichu thoughtfully and snorted. "Of course they wouldn't let me go, but why don't you ask me if I'll let them go?" Hijichu was speechless. "What do you want to do?" Gu Nianji stood up. Her slender and graceful figure was the most beautiful scenery to behold. "I've had enough of them bullying and using me. This time it's my turn to bully and use them," Gu Nianji said casually. Her clear voice was filled with unquestionable murderous intent. "They've done all kinds of evil, but they still want to gain both fame and fortune. Are they dreaming so that they can reincarnate into a good family?" Hijichu raised his head and looked deeply at Gu Nianji. This little girl who used to only know how to hide under the table and look at people had really grown up. Not only had she grown up, but she had also accumulated enough power and experience to take revenge on the evil culprits who had used her as a lab rat back then. Hijichu's eyes filled with tears unknowingly. In her shimmering peach blossom eyes, the things that no one knew about and the feelings that were buried deep in her heart turned into tears and gushed out at this moment. Gu Nianji looked down at Hijichu's tearful face and was stunned. "Young Master Hijichu looked at her with a smile through his tears. He slowly stood up and tried his best to hide the sobs in his voice. He hugged her. "I'm fine. I'm happy for you, Nianji, sister." Gu Nianji's tears flowed out as well. At this moment she could finally feel the familial connection between her and Hijichu. "Young Master can I call you brother?" she asked carefully. She couldn't believe how lucky she was. Hijichu nodded. His tears flowed even more silently. He couldn't speak. Gu Nianji wrapped her arms around his neck and called out to him repeatedly. "Brother. Brother. Brother. I have a biological brother." Hijichu took a deep breath, stroked her head and let go of her. "All right, don't tell anyone about this for now. We still have a lot of things to do." Gu Nianji nodded. "I understand. I don't want anyone to know about this for now, but I still want to do a DNA test." She had her own plans. "I can't find a suitable candidate to test your DNA for now." Hijichu shook his head and took out a tissue to wipe her tears. Gu Nianji also took out a tissue to wipe his tears. The two of them looked at each other and felt a little silly. Of course, Gu Nianji wouldn't say that she had Lu Jin, an omnipotent treasure, on her side. She could only smile and ramble on. "Young Master your appearance just now reminded me of a poem, 'Even heartless people are moving.'" Hijichu. He curled his index finger and tapped Gu Nianji's forehead. "You only know how to talk nonsense. Is that how men are described? What does reading poetry have to do with men and women?" Gu Nianji pushed Hijichu's hand away. "You're angry out of humiliation." Gu Nianji had caused a ruckus and cried. The knot in her heart had been untied and she was in a better mood. Only then did she realize that she was so hungry that she could barely stand. She said weakly, "Young Master you said you wouldn't give me less food." Hijichu. He had lost his appetite, but Gu Nianji could still feel hungry. "Okay, I'll ask the kitchen to prepare some of your favorite dishes for you." Hijichu called the kitchen guard as he spoke. Dinner was prepared very quickly. In less than half an hour, Gu Nianji's favorite dishes were served in the dining room. Gu Nianji and Hijichu went to the dining room for dinner. Qingjian came back and was shocked to see Gu Nianji in the dining room. "Nianji? Why is it you?" He turned to look at Hijichu and frowned. "Didn't you invite Qingying to dinner? Where is she?" Hijichu scooped a bowl of sea cucumber millet soup for Gu Nianji and said without looking up, "I have something to do. I'll make an appointment with Qingying another day." "You have something to do? What do you have to do?" Qingjian glanced at Gu Nianji. "Is she your business?" It was too rude of him to say that. If it was in the past, Gu Nianji would have retorted. But now that she thought of Qin Suwen, Gu Nianji actually didn't know how to face Qingjian. Therefore she didn't say anything and silently took a sip of the delicious sea cucumber millet soup with a spoon. He Qingjian sat down and was a little surprised by Gu Nianji's unusual silence. However, since she didn't retort, He Qingjian didn't bring up the topic again. However, looking at the table full of dishes that Gu Nianji loved to eat, He Qingjian sighed in his heart. After having dinner with Xie Qingying for so many days, He Zhichu still didn't know what Xie Qingying liked to eat. He remembered what Gu Nianji liked to eat very well. This son? He Qingjian shook his head and began to eat without batting an eyelid. After dinner, He Qingjian still had a meeting to attend. After drinking a cup of tea, he took his private car to the military. Gu Nianji also got up to leave. He Zhichu said, "I'll send you back." Gu Nianji nodded with a smile. "Even if you didn't ask, I would have asked you to send me back. It's so late, I don't dare go home alone. I won't let you walk alone at night." He Zhichu took the car keys. "Let's go, I'll send you back." The two of them walked out of the He residence side by side. Gu Nianji was in a good mood and chatted and laughed with He Zhichu. He Zhichu, on the other hand, looked a little preoccupied, but there was still an undisguised gentleness in his eyes as he looked at Gu Nianji. Xie Qingying got out of the car with a food box and walked towards He Zhichu and Gu Nianji, who were about to get into the car. "Young Master He, have you finished dinner?" she asked with a smile. "I made you some supper. You've been working too much overtime recently. You don't go to bed until 3 or 4 in the morning every day. If this goes on, your health will collapse." Gu Nianji was also very surprised. "Young Master He, have you been so busy recently? Don't go to bed so late again. It's really not good for your health." He Zhichu was expressionless. He said lightly, "I can't help it when I'm busy, but I'm almost done. I won't go to bed so late in the future." He turned to see Xie Qingying and didn't miss the flash of embarrassment and disappointment in her eyes. He Zhichu took the food box from her and said, "I'll eat when I get back." "Okay, I'll wait for you here," Xie Qingying quickly said. "Do you want me to send it in for you?" He Zhichu hesitated. Xie Qingying was even more embarrassed. Under Gu Nianji's gaze, she even felt a little ashamed and was about to turn around and leave. Gu Nianji stopped her. "Then I'll have to trouble you, cousin Xie." He Zhichu had no choice but to say, "Okay, wait for me at home." He stuffed the food box back into Xie Qingying's hand. Xie Qingying's depressed mood instantly became happy again. She pursed her lips into a smile and nodded gently. "Okay, I'll wait for you to come back." Gu Nianji waved at her politely. "Then goodbye, cousin Xie. I'm going home." Xie Qingying quickly smiled. "Okay, it's indeed not safe for you to go back alone. Young Master He, you must send my cousin home and watch her go in with your own eyes before coming back." "Okay, I will." He Zhichu opened the car door and let Gu Nianji in. Xie Qingying watched as He Zhichu's car sped away in front of her. She smiled and turned around to enter the He family's mansion with the food box. Gu Nianji texted Lu Jin and Hua Xiaoheng from the car to tell them that she would be home soon. Lu Jin, Lu Yuan, and Hua Xiaoheng didn't stay idle after they got home. They kept an eye on the He family's movements. It wasn't until they received Gu Nianji's text message that they heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it was a close call. He Zhichu's car stopped in front of Gu Nianji's apartment complex. He said, "Do you want me to send you in?" Gu Nianji unbuckled her seatbelt and shook her head with a smile. "No need. The neighborhood here is very safe. I'll just go in." He Zhichu still got out of the car and leaned against the front of the car. He lit a cigarette and watched her back disappear into the tree-lined path at the entrance of the neighborhood. On a summer night, the thick shade of the trees drew silhouettes under the night sky. Another tall figure turned around from behind the tree and walked towards He Zhichu. "Thank you, young Master He, for sending Nianji back." The person who spoke was Hua Xiaoheng. This is today's big chapter update, episode 1841, Fragrant Bait. It's the last day of July. Let me remind everyone that you can vote for your monthly votes and recommendation votes, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1853. He Zhichu put out the cigarette in his hand and threw it into the trash can in the corner. He stood up straight and said calmly without looking at Hua Xiaoheng, "It's my job. No need to thank me." "It's best if young Master He thinks that way." Hua Xiaoheng smiled. His attitude towards He Zhichu was surprisingly gentle, and his words were not harsh. He Zhichu's eyes flashed as he suppressed the emotions in his heart. He sneered and pointed at himself. "Mr. Peter has caught up to Nianji so quickly? Did you ask me?" "This is between Nianji and me. Why should I ask young Master He?" Hua Xiaoheng pretended to be confused. "I'm being polite to you, but you take it seriously. Forget it, I'll be going back to the Soviet Union in a few days. Young Master He, please take care of Nianji." You're also very relaxed. Aren't you afraid that Nianji will have a change of heart when you come back from the Soviet Union? Yijichu opened the car door and was about to get in. Hua Xiaoheng waved his hand without turning his head. I'm confident that she won't have a change of heart. Yijichu's expression changed. His fingers gripped the car door handle tightly. He held it in but still blurted out. Do you think I would have let her be with you if it weren't for you? With that, he got into his car and stepped on the accelerator. The car let out a low roar and charged forward, leaving behind a trail of dust. Hua Xiaoheng suddenly turned around and narrowed his eyes as he looked in the direction where Yijichu had disappeared. His eyelids twitched uncontrollably. It seemed that he had underestimated Yijichu. When he returned to his home, Yijichu walked into the living room with his head lowered. Xie Qingying, who was flipping through a magazine in the living room, looked up in surprise and smiled. Young Master He, you're back. Yijichu stopped in his tracks and looked at Xie Qingying in a daze. Why are you still here? Xie Qingying, she stood up awkwardly and said softly. It's good that you're back. I'll leave first. Young Master He, rest early. The supper is in the kitchen. Get the orderly to heat it up for you. She lowered her head and hurried to the door. Her light chiffon sleeves brushed past Yijichu's shoulder and brushed against the back of his hand. Yijichu's hand seemed to have been scalded, and he reflexively reached out to grab Xie Qingying's arm. Xie Qingying was stunned for a moment. She looked up at Yijichu and asked hesitantly, Young Master He, what's wrong? She could tell that Yijichu's emotions weren't quite right. He looked normal, but in fact he was extremely depressed, so much so that his mind was in a trance and his consciousness was in a mess. Yijichu looked down at Xie Qingying. From this angle, he could see the bridge of her nose, which formed a perfect shadow under the light. Young Master He? Xie Qingying asked softly. His eyes were almost unfocused. He seemed to be looking at her, but it also seemed like he was looking through her to somewhere further away. Yijichu's mind was warring with himself as he clamored to expel a certain figure that shouldn't be there. Forget it. She would never belong to him. She could never belong to him. He should recognize the reality, abandon all unrealistic fantasies, and close the door in his heart. Yijichu closed his eyes and exerted force to pull Xie Qingying into his arms. Xie Qingying was surprised and delighted. She hadn't expected Yijichu to do this. She was so excited that her body was trembling. She snuggled into Yijichu's broad and warm chest, feeling like everything wasn't real. This was the first time Yijichu had taken the initiative to be intimate with her. She stood on her tiptoes and piously offered her lips. It was an unforgettable kiss with a surging tide of passion. Xie Qingying could barely breathe. Her legs were weak and she couldn't support her body. She hung completely in Yijichu's arms. Yijichu picked her up with a dark expression and strode to his bedroom. Gu Nianji walked very slowly on the tree-lined path in the apartment complex. The early summer night in the imperial capital wasn't too hot. The fragrance of grass floated in the air. Occasionally, there were a few frogs croaking from the pond in the neighborhood, breaking the silence of the night. Along the way she walked at a relaxed pace, smiling at the people strolling in the neighborhood. After the people recovered from their shock, they also smiled at her and greeted her silently. After walking and stopping, she finally returned to her apartment door. She reached out her palm and pressed the password lock on the door. Before the door opened, a large hand came from behind and covered her hand. She was very familiar with the warm breath coming from behind her. Gu Nianji didn't turn around. She leaned back and a warm embrace greeted her from behind and caught her. Hua Xiaoheng hugged her from behind and kissed her head. Welcome home. Gu Nianji chuckled and shook her head. We haven't gone home yet. Hua Xiaoheng knew what she was talking about and hugged her even tighter. We'll go back. When we get back we'll hold our wedding. Russian President Putin even said he'll be our witness. Gu Nianji curled her lips. And little Corgi. I wonder if he still remembers Daddy and Mommy. Hua Xiaoheng. Actually, he didn't want to be that short-legged dog's daddy. However, Gu Nianji kept nagging about her longing for little Corgi, so Hua Xiaoheng didn't interrupt her fantasy. The two of them were kissing at the door and momentarily forgot to go in. Lu Jin clearly saw Gu Nianji return from the surveillance cameras in the room, but he didn't see her enter the door for a long time. When he looked at the camera again there was no image. It was pitch black and he couldn't see anything. What happened? Could the surveillance cameras be broken? Lu Jin muttered as he opened the door and saw Hua Xiaoheng look up. Gu Nianji was leaning lazily in the crook of his arm. Her lips were red and glistening. Lu Jin's face instantly darkened, but since Hua Xiaoheng had once risked his life to save him, he swallowed his anger. Come in. Who are you kissing at the door for? Lu Jin glared at Hua Xiaoheng angrily and turned to enter the room. His old heart. Where was the instant heart reliever pill? He was sick and he needed to take medicine. Lu Yuan saw Lu Jin enter with a dark expression, followed by a calm Hua Xiaoheng and an embarrassed Gun Yanji. He immediately understood. However, this time he didn't speak up for Hua Xiaoheng. Instead, he said lightly, "Xiaoheng, you're too careless. I see that your basic skills have been wasted recently. From tomorrow onwards, I'll give you special training." President Lu. Hua Xiaoheng quickly raised his hands in surrender. "I'm going back to the Soviet Union tomorrow. We'll talk about the special training later, okay? You're going to Moscow?" Lu Yuan's expression became serious. "By the way, we haven't asked you yet. You're from the Soviet Union, right? How did you get involved with the KGB?" "Of course there's a deal," Hua Xiaoheng said lightly. Lu Yuan didn't let him go. "What kind of deal did you make with the Soviet Union?" Hua Xiaoheng sat down calmly and said with a smile, "I brought a documentary to Mr. Pushin, the leader of the Soviet Union. The 20th anniversary of the fall of the Soviet Union." Gun Yanji suddenly understood and quickly said, "I understand. No wonder Yeltsin and Gorbachev died in New York before they could make any waves." Hua Xiaoheng's identity was also exposed at the New Year's countdown party in Times Square in New York. Lu Yuan also reacted and sighed repeatedly. No wonder, no wonder. So Yeltsin and Gorbachev's deaths weren't accidental injuries by stray bullets? Of course it wasn't accidental injuries but precise shots, Hua Xiaoheng said with a smile. The KGB's ace of the Far East, Peter, personally took action. No one had a chance of survival. You're talking about the real ace of the Far East, Peter, right? Gun Yanji thought of the man with drooping eyelids and never waking up. She clicked her tongue and said, "He's really cunning." Hua Xiaoheng's ace of the Far East was fake. No wonder the Soviet Union had deliberately exposed his identity. The real ace of the Far East was still in the shadows behind the scenes. This was the real trump card. Hua Xiaoheng said, "At the time, I was still in the process of gaining Pushin's trust. He didn't really believe that Yeltsin and Gorbachev would do the same thing. I set up a trap to let him see what Yeltsin and Gorbachev were doing in New York." When the video of Yeltsin and Gorbachev secretly talking to the President of the United States about launching the Moscow Spring was sent back, Pushin made up his mind to get rid of these two people. If they don't die, the same history might happen to the Soviet Union here. This is completely unacceptable to Pushin. Gun Yanji's heart skipped a beat when she heard this. She held Hua Xiaoheng's hand and said worriedly, "Then why did you go back to the Soviet Union? You're done with them now, aren't you?" Lu Yuan also said worriedly, "Xiaoheng, you don't have any bargaining chips now. What if the Soviet Union detains you? They know you're from the other world, right?" Hua Xiaoheng nodded calmly. "Only Mr. Pushin knows. No one else knows." This kind of thing was too unbelievable. Moreover, as the top leader, Pushin had to consider the interests of his own country. As for the other world, he was no longer interested in it. There was no Soviet Union there. The ideals they had once fought for had been swallowed by others. He didn't want to have any contact with the other world at all. Hua Xiaoheng had also calculated this point, which was why he had chosen to stay in the Soviet Union. Lu Yuan's eyes flashed. He suddenly understood why Hua Xiaoheng wanted to return to the Soviet Union at this time. "You go. I'll stay here to protect Nianji." Lu Yuan glanced at Lu Jin indifferently and continued, "Great scientist Lu, if you want to cause trouble again, please wait until Xiaoheng comes back. Otherwise, I'm afraid I won't be able to protect your daughter by myself." Gun Yanji quickly said, "President Lu, I'll protect myself. You don't have to worry about me." Lu Yuan's gaze swept over and he said calmly, "It's the same for you. When you cause trouble, you're even more powerful than your father. If the two of you work together, I think the two of you will be tied for first place in the demon world." Gun Yanji, she glanced at Lu Jin guiltily. Lu Jin shielded her behind him without hesitation and said angrily to Lu Yuan, "My Nianji is the most reasonable. When has she ever caused trouble?" Gun Yanji tugged at Lu Jin's shirt in amusement. "Dad, I'm sleepy. I'm going to sleep." Lu Jin immediately turned around and said, "Go rest. By the way, have you eaten at the He family's house? That bastard He Jichu didn't do anything to you, did he?" Gun Yanji nodded, then shook her head. "I've eaten. Young master, he didn't do anything to me." She thought about it and said, "Dad, I want to have a DNA test in 2 days. Can you help me?" "Sure, no problem." Lu Jin agreed immediately. He forgot to ask Gun Yanji whose DNA she wanted to test. Gun Yanji rested for 2 days before she recovered from the jet lag. Actually, she was in good health. Under normal circumstances, one day would be enough to recover from the jet lag. However, she was in a low mood and Hua Xiaoheng wasn't by her side, so it took her an extra day to recover. After recovering from the jet lag, Gu Nianji immediately called He Zhichu. He Zhichu was in a meeting at the military headquarters. After he came out of the meeting, his orderly handed the phone back to him and said, "Young Master Miss Gu has called a few times." They saw the caller ID but no one picked up. He Zhichu quickly swiped open the phone and called. "Nianji, when you called me, I was in a meeting at the military headquarters." They were in a meeting now, so they couldn't bring their phones into the meeting room. Gu Nianji sat on the bay window in her bedroom and looked at the blue sky and white clouds in the distance. She said leisurely, "Young Master I want to ask you for a favor." "What is it?" "Tell me, as long as I can do it." He Zhichu answered without hesitation. "I want to know if your mother still has any blood samples, teeth or hair left." He Zhichu stopped in his tracks. "You want to have a DNA test?" "Yes." Gu Nianji had already calmed down. Unlike before, when she thought of this question, she would feel awkward when facing He Zhichu. He Zhichu's voice was also very calm. "What's the use of having it? Where can I get a DNA test? Even if it's the military hospital, I can't guarantee its safety." Gu Nianji pursed her lips. She wanted to refute, but she remembered that even in the other world, Hua Xiaoheng didn't ask the military hospital to keep her medical information. He only asked Chen Lai to be her exclusive doctor. On He Zhichu's side, he didn't have a trusted military doctor like Chen Lai who could entrust secrets to him. And Lu Jin couldn't be exposed. Gu Nianji rolled her eyes and said, "How about this? Can you help me get some blood samples or hair from your mother first? When I have the chance, I'll do a DNA test myself. Is that okay?" "You'll do it yourself?" He Zhichu hesitated. "Do you know how to do it? What's so difficult about that?" Gu Nianji patted her chest confidently. "I can learn if I don't know how to do it. Don't forget, DNA tests are all done with instruments now. I just need to know how to operate the instruments. I've even performed gamma knife surgery on you before." He Zhichu, this is today's big chapter update, 1842, the price. On the first day of August, please give your monthly tickets to Major General Hua. Come, it's August 1st Army Day. Please give your monthly tickets to Major General Hua to celebrate the holidays. P.S. Nearly 1,000 words have been deleted from this chapter. It doesn't affect the plot, but maybe the relatives don't want to see this detail, so it won't be released for the time being. There will be a full version in the group. Moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1854. Speaking of the gamma knife surgery that Gu Nianji had performed on him last time, He Zhichu easily thought of the mysterious person who had gone to H City Hospital. It was this person who had performed the surgery on the seriously injured and dying Gu Nianji and saved her life. His eyes flashed and he chuckled softly. "You're the only one who can do it." His voice was cold and clear, but his tone was familiar and doting. Gu Nianji grimaced. "Young Master don't doubt me. Really, I learn things very quickly. I believe you. If I don't believe you, who else can I believe?" He Zhichu's smile was even more meaningful and sinister. Fortunately, Gu Nianji couldn't see him like this. Otherwise, she would have moved even further away from him. As expected, Gu Nianji didn't notice at all. She smiled and quickly said, "Young Master that's great. Then when are you going to give me your mother's blood sample?" He Zhichu thought about it carefully. His mother, Qin Suwen, had passed away suddenly. His father, He Qingjian, didn't understand why Qin Suwen had died so suddenly. Although even the forensic doctor had found no traces of homicide, his father still took it to heart. He had always believed that Gu Xiangwen had caused Qin Suwen's death. Even if he hadn't killed her with his own hands, it had still been caused by him. That was why he had spared no effort to set up an inescapable net across the country to arrest Gu Xiangwen. He just wanted to know why Qin Suwen had died in her study after Gu Xiangwen had met her once. Gu Xiangwen had hidden for several years. Later, for the sake of the 12-year-old Gu Nianji, he had appeared and taken her away. Soon after, he had died in a fire because of a car accident. Because the car exploded right in front of him, he could still remember the earth-shattering explosion and the raging flames until now. "Nianji, I have to think about how to find my mother's DNA sample." "Don't worry," He Zhichu said with a faint smile. Gu Nianji nodded repeatedly. Okay. Then I'll wait for young Master good news." He Zhichu grunted in acknowledgement. After hanging up, he shook his head self-deprecatingly. How could it be that simple? Ever since his mother's sudden death, All the information about his mother, including her medical report from the family doctor, blood samples from the blood draw, as well as all the medical records and blood and tooth samples from the dentist and ophthalmologist, had been put away by his father, He Qingjian, and was under the care of someone else. He Jichu frowned slightly. He stood outside in the sunlight for a while before turning around and getting into the car. He ordered the orderly to drive to He Qingjian. He Qingjian's office was also in the military headquarters, but it was on the other side of the military headquarters. It took about 5 minutes to drive there. He Jichu called He Qingjian when he was in the car. After confirming that He Qingjian wasn't in a meeting or had any urgent business to deal with, he made an appointment to meet him. Ever since He Jichu returned from the other world, this was the first time he had spoken to He Qingjian so seriously. He Qingjian of Master of Qin. He Qingjian was of flat. To he of to of zhou to he time. Of he Qingjian of Emperor, to him of. The soundproofing facilities here were excellent. There were also all kinds of anti-surveillance devices and electromagnetic interference facilities. Here one could only communicate through the landline. Cell phones could not be used. The security measures were top-notch. The floor was covered with a thick woolen carpet. It was soft and silent as one walked forward. He Qingjian was sitting on the sofa behind a rosewood low table, sipping a cup of tea. Seeing He Jichu come in, He Qingjian waved at him and said warmly, "Ah Chu, come and sit." He Jichu sat down in front of him and casually picked up the cup of tea to take a sip. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he asked casually, "Dad, Mom has been dead for so many years. Aren't you going to bury her?" "Why should I bury her?" He Qingjian said coldly. "Your mother died for no reason. As long as I'm alive, I won't give up on finding the real reason for her death. As long as I can't find it, I won't bury her." "Then when do you want to bury her?" He Jichu frowned. "She's already dead. You can't bury her after so many years. Are you really thinking about my mother?" "When?" "On the day I die." He Qingjian stood up angrily and clenched his fists as he glared at He Jichu. "You unfilial son. Aren't you afraid that your mother's spirit in heaven will be sad when she sees you talking like that? Death is like an extinguished lamp. How can there be a spirit in heaven?" He Jichu's voice was exceptionally cold and emotionless. "Moreover, the only person who might know the truth is already dead. How are you going to investigate? Besides, even if she's buried, it won't stop you from investigating the truth," He Jichu said frankly. He Jichu said frankly, "If you don't have the face to see my mother, I'll take care of her funeral." "How dare you?" He Qingjian waved his fist at He Jichu. After trying for a long time, he still couldn't bear to hit him. He could only bluff and shake it. "I'm warning you. Don't even think about touching your mother's body. She's fine in the liquid nitrogen. Don't disturb her. Dad, accept reality. Mom has passed away and you've already remarried," He Jichu said calmly and cruelly. His shimmering almond-shaped eyes no longer carried the cold and conceited affection. He Qingjian's vision went black. He clutched his chest and panted heavily. He almost collapsed. He Jichu was shocked. He stood up abruptly and strode over. He happened to support He Qingjian, who was on the verge of collapse. "Where's your medicine?" He Jichu hurriedly helped him back to the sofa and sat down. He then pressed the internal phone and asked the doctor to come over and treat He Qingjian. 3 minutes later, the doctor arrived with a full set of medical equipment. He immediately began emergency treatment in the small reception room. He Qingjian's face slowly turned from gray to pale, and then a hint of blood appeared on his face. Although he didn't wake up, he didn't look as scary as before. The doctor pushed the door open and came out. He saw He Jichu standing expressionlessly at the door of the small reception room with his hands in his pockets. He quickly said, "Young Master He, don't worry. General, he was just angry for a moment. After all, he's old and his coronary heart disease and high blood pressure are more serious. The blood vessels in his head are also blocked. We're planning to perform an angiogram on General He to clear the blocked blood vessels in his brain." He Jichu nodded. "Thank you for your trouble." He then asked, "Does my father need to be hospitalized for treatment?" "You can be hospitalized. Anyway, you'll have an angiogram in a few days. Go to the hospital to recuperate for a few days." The doctor guessed that the father and son had probably had an argument again, which was why General He was so angry. However, he didn't say it out loud. After all, this was a family matter. He Jichu agreed with the doctor's suggestion and personally brought He Qingjian to the special VIP ward of the military hospital to recuperate. The attending doctor and the hospital director rushed over to welcome them. They even discussed the surgery plan with Hijichu for the entire afternoon. By the time they finished discussing all the details of the surgery, it was already 8 o'clock at night. At night in the imperial capital, the lights were just turned on. The entire city was like a huge crystal lamp, dazzling to the point of dazzling. When Hijichu came out of the hospital, he received a call from Xie Qingying. "Young Master He, when are you coming back? I've already asked Shaolin in the kitchen to prepare dinner. Where's Uncle? He hasn't come home yet." Hijichu looked at his watch and said calmly, "Yes, my father is in the hospital. I'm going home now." Uncle is in the hospital?" Xie Qingying was extremely shocked. "What illness? Is it serious?" "It's nothing serious. It's an old illness. I plan to have surgery in a few days, so I'll go to the hospital to recuperate first." Hijichu rubbed his temples. He didn't know how to tell Gunyanji. Qin Suwen's body was still preserved in liquid nitrogen and hadn't been buried yet. But she was really dead. Hijichu understood his father's obsession. He shook his head and got into his car. When he returned to the He family's mansion, Hijichu saw Xie Qingying sitting alone in the dining room. He couldn't help feeling guilty. Xie Qingying looked up and saw Hijichu enter. She immediately smiled. It was a smile that came from the bottom of her heart and was extremely infectious. "Young Master He, you're back." She quickly stood up. "I'll ask the kitchen to prepare the dishes." Hijichu had been busy all day and hadn't eaten anything. He was indeed a little hungry. But he didn't have much appetite. However, looking at Xie Qingying's eager gaze, he reluctantly ate a bowl of rice. Xie Qingying looked at the leftover dishes on the table and said hesitantly, "Young Master He, don't you like these dishes?" She remembered that these were all Hijichu's favorite dishes. Hijichu smiled and reached out to shake her hand. "No, these are all my favorite dishes." He paused and continued, "But I'm in a bad mood today and I don't have much appetite. If I've neglected you, don't worry too much and don't be angry." Xie Qingying was flattered. She quickly shook her head and said, No, I'm not angry." She said carefully, "Young Master He, are you in a bad mood? You can tell me. Don't keep it to yourself." The two of them had a major breakthrough yesterday and they were still getting used to each other. Hijichu saw her like this and shook his head. He said coldly, "I told you not to think too much. I'm fine. I'll be fine in a while." He stood up and said, "I'm tired. If you're fine you can go home early." Xie Qingying didn't insist on staying. She knew that she and Hijichu had a long way to go in the future, so there was no hurry. "Okay, then I'll go back. Young Master He, if you want to talk you can call me anytime." As she spoke, she picked up her bag and planned to leave. At that moment Hijichu's phone rang. He took it out and looked at it. He didn't plan to pick it up, but when he saw that it was Gunyanji, he picked it up without hesitation. "What's wrong? Why are you calling me at this time?" "Young Master He, how's it going on your side? When can you give me your mother's DNA sample?" Gunyanji asked anxiously. She knew she was too anxious but she really couldn't help it. She was very eager to know if she and Qin Suwen were biological mother and daughter. She knew that it was impolite to do so, but this time she really couldn't help it. Hijichu sighed. "Nyenji, I've been very busy all day today. I'll think of a way." He hung up the phone. When Xie Qingying heard this, she didn't have the faint hostility towards Gunyanji like before. Instead, she walked over and said worriedly, "Young Master He, is there something wrong with my cousin? Can I help?" Hijichu turned to look at her. "Didn't you dislike Nyenji? Why did she suddenly become so good?" Xie Qingying also smiled and said frankly, "I used to think that you still had a soft spot for her. I was jealous of her, so I couldn't treat her well. But now, I know that she's no longer an obstacle between us. I don't have any grudges against her. And I'm helping you by helping her. You're too tired and my heart will ache." Actually, most of the reason why women were petty, jealous, and mean was because they were worried about gains and losses and didn't have a sense of security in relationships. When she had enough security, she wouldn't be so stubborn. Hijichu narrowed his eyes. "Qingying, you're a good woman." Xie Qingying was slightly taken aback, but she quickly smiled again. "Young Master He, don't give me the nice guy card. You know that's not what I want." Hijichu smiled and leaned closer. "My person is already yours. What else do you want?" His voice was light and airy, like a feather brushing her ear, making half of her body go limp. Hijichu patted her blushing face and smiled. "Women shouldn't think too much, especially when it comes to men. Don't worry about Nyenji's matters. You can't help her. But I thank you on her behalf." With that, he turned around and walked away. He clapped his hands without a trace of affection. Xie Qingying gritted her teeth as she watched He Zhichu leave. She wanted to laugh, but it was a little bitter. She also had the urge to cry, but she couldn't. Her eyes were sore, as if she had eaten a green olive and chewed it with a special taste. This was the taste of love, right? Xie Qingying staggered into the car. She hadn't stepped on the accelerator for a long time, so her legs were weak. Gu Nianji paced in her apartment, feeling restless. As usual, Lu Yuan held a newspaper and unfolded it. He sat on the sofa and read it carefully. Lu Jin moved his desktop to the small study in Gu Nianji's apartment and did high-energy physics research alone. Lu Yuan saw that Gu Nianji had already walked around more than 10 times, so he couldn't help asking, "Nianji, what's wrong? Is there something on your mind?" She wanted to verify the DNA, but she hid it from Lu Jin and Lu Yuan. Of course, she didn't dare to tell the truth. She stammered, "Major General Hua isn't here. I'm upset." Lu Yuan didn't suspect anything. He smiled and said gently, "Xiaoheng will be back soon. Don't worry." He reminded her again, "Aren't you preparing to deal with Qin Yaoguang and Qin Bei? How are your preparations?" Gu Nianji looked at her phone again. He Zhichu hadn't replied to her text message yet. Sighing, Gu Nianji hit her forehead and perked up. "Okay, I'll go prepare first." Even if she couldn't verify the DNA, it wouldn't stop her from sending Qin Bei and Qin Yaoguang to their deaths. This is today's big chapter update, episode 1843, What More Do You Want? Everyone, please give me your monthly votes. Today is my moderator and group administrator, Momo's birthday. I wish Momo a happy birthday. I had planned to celebrate Momo's birthday with double updates today, but unfortunately the internet at home was cut off. The cell phone network signal in my new home was very weak. I didn't know if it would still be connected tomorrow, so I would only update today. When the internet was restored tomorrow, I would celebrate Momo's birthday with double updates. Moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1855. At this time, in a mansion in the western suburbs of the imperial capital, Qin Bei sat in front of the sofa, his eyes glued to the television. The TV was broadcasting news from the United States. Qin Bei was already over 70 years old, but because he had interacted with foreigners in his early years, his English was quite good. There was no problem watching English TV programs. As he watched, his brows furrowed tighter and tighter. He was very puzzled. They had sent Gu Nianji's DNA sample when she was born. It was also the only DNA sample they had left. How had it become Wen Shui? A few days ago, Lorraine had specially sent someone to deliver a letter to him, asking Wen Shui to make a trip to America. Qin Bei had thought it was to discuss saving Qin Yaoguang. In the end, Wen Shui had become the person closest to perfect genes. What was going on? Qin Bei felt that something was off. However, on TV, Lola was excitedly testifying in front of the U.S. Congress. He told the highest authorities in the U.S. that the Lola Group had achieved some small results in the field of human genetic research. However, their small achievement was a huge step forward in the history of human evolution. Qin Bei stood up with the help of his walking stick and slowly strolled to the French window in the living room. He stared at the night sky outside, lost in thought. As far as the eye could see, there was a small garden. It was the early summer night, and the wind was a little hot. It blew in through the half-open floor-to-ceiling window. The evening fragrant jade in front of the window was as white as jade. It was as moving as the epiphyllum and had a faint fragrance. Qin Bei's gaze fell on the evening fragrant jade and he suddenly felt irritated. He grabbed his walking stick and went out to destroy the evening fragrant jade. Only then did he feel a little better. "Great-grandfather, are you all right?" Qin Bei's grandnephew, Qin Haoshan, walked over and held his arm as they walked up the stairs. Qin Bei smiled and said, "It's nothing, I just can't stand the smell of this flower." After saying that, he sighed and said, "Your aunt hates the night epiphyllum the most, but she likes the evening fragrant jade, which is somewhat similar to the night epiphyllum, the most. She has so many at home. Alas, she's so stubborn. Otherwise, how could she end up like this?" Qin Haoshan felt very sad when he heard that. He quickly comforted him, "Grandpa, Auntie will be fine. Won't the United States put pressure on the government? Just you wait. Let's see what they do tomorrow. I'm old now, so I'll have to rely on you guys in the future." Qin Bei looked up at his tall and handsome grandnephew and nodded kindly. "Haoshan, you're a good person. Just like your aunt, you're a little stubborn. There are plenty of fish in the sea, why do you have to be so attached to a single flower?" Qin Haoshan. He smiled awkwardly, unwilling to talk about this topic. He helped Qin Bei lie down on the bed and covered him with a thin blanket. You should rest early. We still have to wait and see how the government will respond tomorrow. That night, many people in the imperial capital did not sleep well. At 3 o'clock in the morning in the imperial capital, which was also 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the United States Congress released the White Paper on Human Rights in China. The central topic of this 500-page white paper was Qin Yaoguang. The senators and representatives of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives accused the Wuxia Empire of ignoring the basic human rights of the famous female scientist, Qin Yaoguang, and of seriously corrupt justice. A certain high-ranking general used his power for personal gain for the sake of a woman. He listened to the slanderous words of a villain and brazenly threw Qin Yaoguang into prison without a formal trial. The people in the U.S. Congress were impassioned and passed almost all the bills condemning the Wuxia Empire's government. They also declared that if they didn't release Qin Yaoguang unconditionally, they would start a trade war and impose high tariffs on all the Wuxia Empire's exports to the U.S. The Prime Minister of the Wuxia Empire, Xia Beichen, Chairman Long Zhixue of the Senate, and Major General He Zhichu of the military were woken up from their sleep by their secretaries at almost the same time. Prime Minister Xia, the news from the U.S. is out. Xia Beichen immediately sobered up. They had already received intelligence that the United States would play tricks on them. Although they were prepared, they were still a little nervous when they heard that the other party had finally made a move. What kind of news is it? What's going on? It's for Miss Qin Yaoguang, the secretary said in a low voice as she stood at the side and read the news summary to Xia Beichen. Xia Beichen listened and hurriedly changed her clothes. What about Speaker Long and Major General He? Someone has already gone to call them. Or should we continue with the original plan? Yes, let's proceed with the original plan. At 4 o'clock in the morning in the imperial capital, the Prime Minister of the Cabinet, Xia Beichen, Long Zhixue of the Senate, and He Zhichu of the military were already sitting in the most heavily secured conference room of the Supreme Council of the military in the imperial capital. They were rewatching the news summary sent by the United States. The white paper from the United States Congress was very long, but the content was very poor. It was a cliché over and over again, but the topic was very novel. This time, they brazenly named Qin Yaoguang and only wanted Qin Yaoguang. They are really determined to use all of the trade between the Wuxia Empire and the United States in exchange for Qin Yaoguang's freedom, Speaker Long said expressionlessly as he flipped through the white paper on human rights in the Wuxia Empire that had been sent back. The Wuxia Empire's foreign trade with the United States reached $500 billion last year. $500 billion just for one person. Xia Beichen's brows were tightly furrowed. What should we do? What should we do? He Zhichu's expression was stern. Don't tell me the two of you still want to agree? Xia Beichen sighed and looked as if he had aged 10 years. It's not a matter of whether I want to or not. With our economic situation, do we really have to fight the Americans head-on? This is a method of killing 1,000 enemies and losing 1,000 of our own. They can both suffer losses, but we can't. Speaker Long also looked at Xia Beichen hesitantly. Xia Beichen nodded at him. The two of them had similar thoughts. Only He Zhichu firmly opposed it. His father was supposed to attend this meeting, but his father was currently recuperating in the hospital and was going to have surgery tomorrow. Therefore, after obtaining the consent of Prime Minister Xia and Speaker Long, he temporarily attended on his father's behalf. He placed his hands on the conference table and said seriously, I don't understand your diplomacy or your economy, but I understand law and military affairs. I only know that when the other party wants a person at all costs, we must not agree. It's just like fighting a war. Even if we are not as strong as the other party, when the other party uses all their strength to seize a high ground that we think is unimportant, I know that we must defend this high ground even if we die. Because the other party has spent so much effort to seize it, it must be because this place has benefits that exceed their costs for them. It doesn't matter if we don't understand it now. As long as the person is in our hands, the other party will definitely weigh the pros and cons carefully. They won't cut off all means of retreat. Major General, he makes it sound nice, but are you sure? Xia Beichen asked unhappily. You also said that you don't understand economics. Then let me tell you, if a trade war really breaks out, how many factories will close down, foreign trade will decline sharply, and the surplus will decrease or even expand to a deficit. The economic situation will be very ugly. Speaker Long nodded. Yes, our country is such a big country. Once the economy has problems, the people will not agree. If the other party levies tariffs, our economy will have problems. With all due respect, Prime Minister Xia, you are doing nothing. This is a serious dereliction of duty, Hijichu said calmly. The corners of Xie Beichen's mouth twitched twice. He smiled bitterly and said, Major General you really dare to say that? I won't wear this hat. I was just telling you the serious consequences of a trade war. How did it become my dereliction of duty? May I ask how I dereliction of duty? I racked my brains for the cabinet and racked my brains for the development of the economy. Speaker Long saw that the two of them were about to quarrel, so he quickly came out to smooth things over. Okay, don't be anxious. Everyone is doing this for the sake of the country and the people. They all have good intentions. Let's sit down and talk slowly. Talk about what? Hijichu slammed the table and said coldly, In my opinion, it's not even dawn yet. Shoot Qin Yaoguang immediately. Respond to the American white paper tomorrow morning during work time and tell them that they're a step too late. Qin Yaoguang is already dead. Prime Minister Xie and Speaker Long stared at Hijichu. They couldn't believe their ears. Qin Yaoguang was once He Qingjian's remarried wife, Hijichu's stepmother. She was also his life savior. How could she be so ruthless? Major General He, with all due respect, is there really any solid evidence for Qin Yaoguang's case? Xie Beichen couldn't help sneering. Wasn't it all because of Gu Nianji? He felt bad for his niece Xie Qingying. Gu Nianji used to be Hijichu's fiancée, and Qin Yaoguang's case was mainly led by Gu Nianji. So the United States said that a high-ranking general used his power for personal gain for the sake of a woman. Do you know who this person is, Major General He? Speaker Long also spoke up for Xie Beichen. How is there no solid evidence? Hijichu said lightly, She cooperated with Qin Bei and used infrasonic weapons against me in an attempt to murder me. Isn't that solid evidence? But there was no public trial for this case. Speaker Long frowned. And I heard that the Supreme Court of the military is reviewing this case and feels that Qin Yaoguang doesn't have the conditions to mobilize infrasonic weapons because she was imprisoned by the military at the time. How could she have had the chance to plan this operation? Speaker Long had the right to know the whole story of everything related to the law. It was just that most of the time he didn't have time to pay attention to every case, so he could only devote his limited energy to a few important cases. Every year, Speaker Long would have a backup of the cases that were sent to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Military Court for review. He wouldn't interfere with the judiciary, but he would understand the direction of judicial enforcement and the demands of the people so that he could be more targeted when formulating laws. Hijichu's case of being injured by an infrasonic weapon couldn't be tried in public because it involved too much confidential information. As for the kidnapping case that Gu Nianji sued Qin Yaoguang 8 years ago, because it was related to Gu Nianji's background, Hijichu didn't want others to notice Gu Nianji's special genes, so he didn't want the case to be tried in public. Then what should we do? Speaker Long shook his head and sighed. You don't know how good the Americans are at setting the pace. They will mobilize online public opinion and incite some netizens who want the world to be in chaos to become online judges. They will demand that a lot of information that they don't have the authority to know be made public, and then conduct an online trial. If we don't do this, then there's a problem with our judiciary. All of them are more capable than judges, lawyers, prosecutors, and police who are truly professional. Xie Beichen also slammed the table and said angrily, Any judiciary would make mistakes. This would exist in any country and had nothing to do with the system. However, using a mistake to attack the entire social system was malicious, stupid, and vicious. Hijichu thought about it for a long time and finally said, Let's not respond for now. Let's see how public opinion responds before making a decision. Okay, I agree. Speaker Long nodded immediately. He didn't want to give in to the United States, but he also didn't want his country's economy to be damaged, so he was in a dilemma. Prime Minister Xie nodded reluctantly. Okay, then let's wait another day. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs can't respond too late, or it will be very passive. By the time the meeting ended, the sky was already bright outside. Hijichu had been in a meeting for half the night and was very tired. He took a private car back to the He family's mansion and saw a familiar silhouette standing by the iron gate of the mansion, looking down at her phone. Hijichu smiled slightly, got out of the car and strode over. Nianji, why are you here so early? This is the first update of the day, episode 1844, Not Worth It. Please give me a guaranteed monthly vote. Today is a birthday update for my moderator and group administrator, Momo. There will be a second update at 8 p.m. P.S. Thank you, Momo, for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. Moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1856. Gu Nianji looked up to see He Jichu. She quickly put away her phone and smiled. That's what I wanted to ask you. It's so early and you're not home? She looked up at the morning glow in the sky, then raised her hand to show He Jichu her watch. Look, what time is it now? You worked overtime again yesterday? Gu Nianji looked carefully at He Jichu's face. He didn't try to hide his exhaustion, and there were dark circles under his eyes. It was obvious that he lacked sleep. He Jichu shook his head nonchalantly. It's fine. I'm used to it. Come in. Have you had breakfast? Gu Nianji shrank back guiltily. Not yet. When she woke up in the morning, Lu Yuan and Lu Jin hadn't gotten up yet. She had sneaked out. Then let's eat together. He Jichu's expression didn't change, but his steps were much steadier. Gu Nianji clicked her tongue in her heart, and a meaningful smile hung on her lips. The two of them arrived at the He family's dining room. He Jichu casually asked the orderlies in the kitchen to prepare breakfast and ordered all of Gu Nianji's favorite foods. Gu Nianji smiled and sat down opposite him. After He Jichu drank a cup of coffee, she asked softly, Young Master He, have you been very busy recently? He Jichu glanced at her and casually placed the coffee cup on the table. A little, but I can handle it. What's wrong? Well, I just wanted to ask, when can I get a DNA sample from lawyer Qin Suan? I want to test the DNA. Gu Nianji's face was a little red as she stammered. It was really rude to chase after someone's house to ask for a DNA sample from the other party's mother. However, she really couldn't help it. He Jichu didn't reply to her text, and the previous phone call had also ended after a few words. Gu Nianji didn't dare to say too much in front of Lu Yuan, afraid that she would give herself away, so she had no choice but to see him in person. In order to see her, she had even woken up early in the morning to wait for him at the gate. Unexpectedly, He Jichu really wasn't home. Previously, she had thought that the guards at the door were just brushing her off. He Jichu lowered his eyes and reached out to pick up some food with his chopsticks. He placed it on the small white porcelain plate in front of Gu Nianji and said dryly, Are you that eager? Gu Nianji, anyone would be impatient, right? This was related to her birth mother. Gu Nianji glared angrily at He Jichu. How could he not know how anxious she was? Her eyes reddened as she thought of this. He Jichu's gaze swept over her face and froze. An unknown emotion welled up in his heart. He had completely lost his appetite. He put down his chopsticks and symbolically wiped his mouth with a napkin. This matter is a bit more difficult because my mother's things were all put away by my father and placed together with my mother's body. That place is heavily guarded. It won't be easy for me to get in. Don't worry, give me some time, I'll find a chance to get you out. Gu Nianji was taken aback. Your mother's body? What does that mean? She wasn't buried? He Jichu looked down and said mockingly, Yes, no. It's still preserved in liquid nitrogen. Isn't that ironic? No, that's not what I meant. Gu Nianji quickly shook her head, her heart pounding. Did this mean that she could have a chance to see Qin Suan's body with her own eyes? After all, this was the person who was most likely to be her biological mother. He Jichu sat upright in his seat and looked over calmly. He didn't miss the flash of starlight in Gu Nianji's eyes. He could tell that she was very excited and the corners of his mouth twitched self-deprecatingly. Don't look at me like that. Outsiders can't see the body preserved in liquid nitrogen at all. Gu Nianji smiled embarrassedly and said, I was just thinking about it. Don't think too much, young master He. I'm not thinking too much. He Jichu pointed at the bowl of porridge in front of Gu Nianji. Eat this sea cucumber porridge. You haven't had a good rest these past few days, have you? You've lost weight. Gu Nianji rubbed her face and said narcissistically, It's a good thing to be thin. I used to think that my face was a little too chubby. The baby fat on her face had completely faded away, and the young girl's bright and beautiful appearance had already matured. She was like a flower that was just about to bloom, as if she was about to bloom in the next moment. The beautiful scenery was right in front of him, but he was not the person who could unscrupulously admire it from the side. He Jichu felt a little embarrassed and didn't want to continue this topic. He picked up the remote control and turned on the TV in the dining room. The TV was on the news channel. As soon as he saw the morning news, He Jichu's heart skipped a beat. He had forgotten about the grudge between Gu Nianji and Qin Yaoguang. He had been hounded by Gu Nianji for a DNA sample from Qin Suan for the past few days. He had really forgotten about her previous lawsuit. Gu Nianji heard a few words of the news and turned around in surprise. What are they doing? A trade war? For one person. Qin Yaoguang is so important. Yeah, the United States is dreaming. They really think we're scared. Hijichu didn't think much of it and his eyes were slightly cold. But Qin Yaoguang is a fake. The United States is so interested in her, so let's send her over. Gu Nianji shrugged and sneered. It's impossible to reason with that crazy president of the United States. He only understands one principle, and that is to ask for a sky-high price and pay for it on the spot. It's really the true colors of businessmen. They're so greedy for money. No matter how fake Qin Yaoguang is, she still knows about you, Hijichu said lightly. If you let her out, do you still want to be alone? Or do you want to take the lead and say, if I don't go to hell, who will? Gu Nianji came back to her senses and knew that she had come up with a bad idea. She pursed her lips in embarrassment and turned back to look at the news. She said randomly, but the United States accusations are quite infuriating. What do they mean by corruption of justice? What does it have to do with them whether our case is heard in public or not? Their courts are not allowed to be open to the public. Even now, they can't broadcast or take photos of the situation in their courts. They can only use a portrait artist to draw the situation in the courts. Besides, not all cases can be heard in public. For example, cases related to minors, cases related to sexual assault and rape, cases related to national security, and cases related to military courts. According to the law, these cases can't be heard in public. It's the same abroad. What right do they have to criticize us? If you say that, people will say that you're competing to be the worst and whitewash your country's mistakes, Hijichu said leisurely, his mood gradually improving. Seeing that Gu Nianji wasn't bothered by Qin Suwen's DNA, Hijichu felt that he could still talk to her nicely. How is this competing to be the worst? This is because someone deliberately dragged the situation abroad into this? Gu Nianji's clear eyes suddenly lit up. If we're talking about the matter as it stands and not mentioning other countries, then it's good. Who would have the time to explain it to him? It was clearly because she was ignorant that she became angry out of humiliation after being exposed. She forgot that they were the ones who started competing to be the worst first. In the end, they realized that foreign countries were even worse. How could they not be hysterical after being slapped in the face? Tsk, I can beat up this kind of person online by myself and I won't even have to breathe. Hijichu was amused by Gu Nianji's smug look. He put his hand to his lips and chuckled. He said in a low voice, "Okay then, what do you think we should do about this?" Gu Nianji's fingers tapped lightly on the dining table. She muttered to herself. Their main goal is to say that we convicted Qin Yaoguang without a trial, so they're not convinced. Then why don't we have a public trial? No. Hijichu objected flatly. First of all, the infrasonic weapon case can't be made public. Second of all, your case can't be made public either. This involves your DNA test with Qin Yaoguang. Are you willing to make your DNA public? Of course not. Gu Nianji rested her chin on her hand and lay on the dining table. She was completely listless. Then what should we do? Do we have to bite the bullet? There's no other way. Of course we have to fight it head-on. Gu Nianji pursed her lips disapprovingly and pondered in her heart. Her gaze fell on the photo hanging on the wall of the dining room. This was a family photo of the He family. Of course, it was taken when Qin Suwen was still alive. Qin Suwen's appearance in the photo was very ordinary. She looked like she couldn't be found in a crowd. Thinking back to the photo of Qin Suwen when she was young, Gu Nianji's anger rose. Did they think that she wouldn't be able to expose the past without a DNA test? Gu Nianji suddenly sat up straight and asked, "Young Master He, where's your father?" "He's sick and is recuperating in the hospital. He's going to have surgery today." "What surgery?" "It's a cerebrovascular surgery. He can't be stimulated." Gu Nianji let out an "ah" and was very surprised. "What's wrong with General He? He's not in good health. My father's health hasn't been good ever since my mother passed away. It's just that he's more stubborn and afraid of treatment, so it's been delayed. He can't delay it anymore. He had an argument with me a few days ago and fainted. He hasn't woken up yet. The doctor said that if he doesn't have the surgery soon, he might be paralyzed and might not even wake up." Hijichu didn't say the reason, but Gu Nianji could vaguely guess it. She said guiltily, "Is it because of my request? Young Master He, your father doesn't agree, does he?" She didn't need Hijichu to say it out loud. She had already guessed most of it. Such an intelligent girl in this world, in his heart. They were all unique and irreplaceable. Hijichu's heart suddenly contracted uncontrollably, then suddenly expanded. Blood flowed through his veins twice as fast as usual, but on the surface his expression didn't change at all. Even his voice was normal. "It's not like that. Don't think too much." Hijichu shook his head. Don't worry about this. With the big shots supporting us, the sky won't fall. Gu Nianji wasn't the kind of person who would pretend not to know and stand by if you told her to. She also had some doubts about He Qingjian's condition. She didn't want her father to be in danger after He Zhichu lost his mother. If that was the case, it would be her fault. Gu Nianji didn't want to bear the burden of a life. She gritted her teeth and whispered, "Young Master He, who will you find to operate on your father?" This was today's second update, page 1845. The sea flows across, showing the true character of a businessman. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. I'm here to send a birthday update to my moderator and group administrator, Momo. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1857. He Zhichu glanced at her without batting an eyelid. His lips curled into a smile. Are you very concerned? Of course. It's not anyone else, it's your father, young Master He. Gu Nianji said seriously, I don't have parents myself, so I know the pain of not having parents. I don't want young Master He to experience my pain. Ijichu was slightly taken aback. He stared at Gu Nianji for a long time before reaching out to rub her head. You only know how to say silly things. You still have me. Gu Nianji's heart warmed. She rubbed her head against Ijichu's hand and smiled. Yes, you're my brother. Your father is sick, so I have to care even more. I love the house and its crow. She made a face mischievously. Young Master He, you won't be angry if I say your father is a crow, right? He Zhichu couldn't help being amused by her. What if I'm angry? Do you know how to coax me? Yes, my sister has angered my brother, so I have to coax her, Gu Nianji said seriously. But first you have to answer my question. Who are you going to let operate on your father? Gu Nianji looked at He Zhichu without blinking. It was obvious that she cared about his answer. He Zhichu retracted his hand and sighed. He lowered his head and said lightly, in terms of brain surgery, Qin Yaoguang is the most skilled in the country. Oh. Gu Nianji immediately jumped up and objected with a flushed face. It can't be her. Are you going to let her operate on your father? He Zhichu's personality was obviously much calmer than before. He wasn't angry or excited at all when he saw Gu Nianji jumping up and down. He waved for her to sit down and handed her a glass of warm milk. I didn't say I'd let her do the surgery. I was just talking about the possible choices. That still can't be done. Gu Nianji was very tough and even a little disappointed. Young Master He, think about it carefully. If it weren't for Qin Yaoguang, how could your family have become like this? Do you still want to give her a chance? I'm not giving her a chance. I'm talking about the objective situation. He Zhichu calmly knocked on the dining table. In fact, if it weren't for her, you wouldn't have been born and I wouldn't have lived until now. Gu Nianji opened her mouth and the words tumbled in her chest. She almost blurted them out. He Zhichu narrowed his eyes at her and waited for her to tell the truth. Unfortunately, Gu Nianji managed to restrain herself. She took a deep breath and sat down again. She took the warm milk and drank it for a while. Milk had a calming effect, so Gu Nianji's emotions finally calmed down after drinking the milk. She fiddled with the milky white milk bottle in her hand and lowered her eyes as she said, Young Master He, didn't you consider me? He Zhichu. I've performed gamma knife surgery on you before. In fact, that surgery proved that I was even better than Qin Yaoguang, Gu Nianji said shamelessly. She mentally prepared herself and raised her head again to look at He Zhichu intently. Your father's brain surgery also requires a gamma knife. Why didn't you let me do it? He Zhichu frowned. Nianji, it's not that I don't believe you. If I were sick, I would not hesitate to let you operate on me. Even if I were to die in your hands, I would not back down at all. But this time is different. This time it's my father. Not only is he my father, but he's also a general in the military. Not only does he need my approval for his surgery, but he also needs the approval of the standing committee members of the Supreme Military Council. Do you think those standing committee members will believe you? Gu Nianji, damn it, young master, he is getting harder and harder to fool. Gu Nianji blinked. Her thick eyelashes were like 2 rows of small fans. He Zhichu looked away and said, of course I want to give my father the best doctor, but I can't be too subjective. Gu Nianji said aggrievedly, you just don't believe me? I believe you, but it's not enough just for me to believe you, He Zhichu said meaningfully. He Zhichu said meaningfully, we still have to convince the standing committee members of the Supreme Military Council. Are you going to say it yourself? He Zhichu looked at his watch. The surgery starts at 10 a.m. today. If you want to convince them, you still have 3 hours. Gu Nianji, How could she convince those military bigwigs at this time? What could she use to convince them? She wanted to help He Qingjian, but she had never thought of using her father's safety in exchange for the success of He Qingjian's surgery. Actually, even if her father didn't show up, He Qingjian's surgery might still have been successful. After all, there were still some capable doctors in the Wuxia Empire's military hospital. Other than Qin Yaoguang, there were also many other brain surgeons. Gu Nianji said dejectedly, "All right then, I'll just say I talked too much." She stood up. "Young master, he rest well. Your father's surgery today probably won't be short. You have to recuperate before you can take care of your father." He Jichu nodded. "Okay, I'll send you back first. I'm really busy today. I'll think of a way to help you after my father's surgery today. Don't worry, young master He. I don't want to do the test for the time being," Gu Nianji said straightforwardly. "That's not important. I have more important things to do." He Jichu raised an eyebrow. "You're not in a hurry? You're not in a hurry to look for me so early?" Gu Nianji glared at He Jichu. "Young master He, don't hit me in the face. How can you speak like that?" He Jichu smiled and moved closer to her. "Then hit me back. I definitely won't fight back." He closed his eyes and waited for Gu Nianji to slap him in the face. Gu Nianji had never seen He Jichu so lazy before. She was angry and amused at the same time. She pushed him and said, all right. "I know you're amazing lawyer He. You used to be Zhangzhuo, right? I can't out-talk you. I think my eloquence has improved again to be able to make lawyer Gu admit defeat in a battle of words." He Jichu teased, regaining his usual sharpness and humor. Gu Nianji also enjoyed getting along with He Jichu like this. She chatted with He Jichu as they walked, and before she knew it, they had reached the entrance of the mansion. He Jichu patted her head. "Don't think too much when you go back. I'm a little busy now, but I'll definitely keep your matter in mind. When I'm done with my work, I'll think of a way for you." "Young master He, there's really no need." Gu Nianji quickly shook her head. "I'm not in a hurry. I've already changed my mind. Without a DNA test, I still have a way to expose Qin Yaoguang's true colors." He Jichu's heart skipped a beat. "What did you say?" "I said even without a DNA test, I can expose Qin Yaoguang's true colors." Gu Nianji clenched her fists. "And Qin Bei. Neither of them are good people." An idea suddenly flashed through He Jichu's mind. He stood there with his hand still on Gu Nianji's head. No one knew what he was thinking. At that moment, a clear female voice was heard. "Nianji, you're here?" Gu Nianji turned around and saw Xie Qingying get out of the car and walk towards her with a smile on her face. Gu Nianji quickly pushed He Jichu's hand away and took a step to the side. She smiled and nodded at Xie Qingying. "Good morning, cousin Xie. Not as early as you." Xie Qingying made a face at her. "Why aren't you going in? Are you looking for young master He? I brought some breakfast over. Young master He had a meeting all night last night and only came home early this morning." She looked up at He Jichu and asked with concern, "Young master He, have you had breakfast?" He Jichu put his hands in his trouser pockets and said coldly, "I just ate with Nianji." Gu Nianji's eyelids twitched when she heard this. She thought that this was a big misunderstanding. She was about to explain when Xie Qingying didn't get angry at all. Instead she laughed. "You've eaten? That's great. I was worried that you'd be working so hard that you'd forget to eat and sleep. You'd be exhausted." She stuffed the breakfast box into He Jichu's hand. "The sea cucumber soup inside has been stewed all night. You can eat it for lunch." He Jichu turned his head and raised his chin at his own house. "Take it in yourself. Why are you giving it to me?" Xie Qingying felt even sweeter that he was talking to her openly in front of Gu Nianji. Women who were immersed in love were always exceptionally magnanimous and tolerant. Xie Qingying didn't want to know at all why Gu Nianji had come to see He Jichu so early. This was between He Jichu and Gu Nianji. Xie Qingying knew very well which line she could cross and which line she couldn't. Xie Qingying nodded at Gu Nianji and smiled. "Then I'll go in first." "Nianji, won't you come in with me? Go in and wait for me for a while. I'll take Nianji back first." He Jichu planned to ask the orderly to drive the car over. Gu Nianji shook her head. "No need, young master He. I can go back by myself." "That won't do. I'm worried about you going back alone." He Jichu looked around. "Did you drive here yourself?" Gu Nianji was a little embarrassed. "I took a taxi." He Jichu glanced at her. "You snuck out?" Gu Nianji, she pursed her lips and denied it. "No, you're thinking too much." She then pointed at Xie Qingying and changed the topic. "Why don't I ask cousin Xie to take me back if young master He is worried?" Hijichu looked at Xie Qingying. Qingying, are you free? Xie Qingying was very happy and quickly said, I'm free, I'm free. Of course I'm free. As she spoke, she stuffed the breakfast box into Hijichu's hand again. Go back to sleep. I'll take Nianji back. Gu Nianji thought so too, so she rejected Hijichu's offer to take her back. She quickly said, Young Master He, sorry to disturb you. Go back and rest. Cousin Xie can take me back. Hijichu finally gave up and said, Then drive carefully. Don't worry, young Master He. I have a driver. Xie Qingying pointed at her car. Hijichu thought about it for a moment and called his orderly over. He said, Drive Miss Gu home and bring Miss Xie back. The orderly saluted. Yes, sir. Xie Qingying and Gu Nianji got into Hijichu's car together, and Hijichu's orderly drove them to Gu Nianji's apartment. In the car, Gu Nianji looked at Xie Qingying, who was beaming with joy. She smiled and asked, Cousin, are you in high spirits after a happy event? Have your wishes come true? This was the first update of the day, episode 1846, People in High Spirits After a Happy Event. Please give me your monthly tickets, there would be a second update at 8 p.m. P.S. Thank you to Little One's Kiss for the 10,000 Chidian coins yesterday. P.S. I plan to do 3 updates tomorrow. I counted and realized that I owed too many updates. I have to start paying them back, moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1858. Xie Qingying smiled and pushed a strand of her hair to the back of her head. She said in a low voice, Thank you for your kind words. I'm with young Master He. When she said that they were together, her cheeks were flushed and her eyes were watery. A woman in love always looked better, and she was much more beautiful than before. Gu Nianji was stunned for a moment, then breathed a sigh of relief. She beamed and said, Congratulations, cousin. Do I have to call you sister-in-law from now on? Xie Qingying smiled and said generously, I hope that if there's a chance in the future, you can call young Master He cousin-in-law. Gu Nianji, so be it then. It was almost the same as her calling Xie Qingying sister-in-law. Gu Nianji was very open-minded. She leaned back in the back seat and nodded. There will definitely be a chance. All the best, cousin. Xie Qingying didn't think that far ahead. She had finally gotten what she wanted and didn't have any ill feelings towards Gu Nianji. She told her honestly, We've just started, but you know that if we want to be together for a long time, love alone isn't enough. I don't know young Master He that well, and young Master He doesn't know me that well either, so what happens in the future really depends on whether we get along with each other. Xie Qingying saw it so clearly that Gu Nianji couldn't help but think highly of her. She nodded with deep emotion and smiled. That's indeed the case. It's easy to fall in love but difficult to get along. If we can get along, we'll be able to grow old together. Don't you love young Master He very much? So cousin, all the best. I will. Xie Qingying smiled contentedly. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but I used to be obsessed with young Master He like a little fan to an idol. That's why he's willing to accept me. Regardless of whether he really likes me or not, I can't give up this opportunity. If you've never chased after a celebrity, you probably won't understand how I feel. Gu Nianji thought to herself, why haven't I chased after a celebrity? I chased after the brightest star in the night sky. At that time, wasn't Major General Hua also that unreachable star to her? If Major General Hua had been willing to accept her from the beginning, she would have been like Xie Qingying. She would have been like a moth flying into a flame, even if she had to die. Because she was young, she still had a lot of time and feelings to squander. If I don't work hard when I'm young and pursue my own emotional goals, do I have to wait until I'm old to find it hard to settle down? Moreover, Hua Xiao was so handsome and single. She felt that she could completely ignore his heart and only care about his body. Gu Nianji made a face at herself and understood Xie Qingying's choice a lot better. Cousin Xie, I treat young Master He as my brother and you're my cousin. I hope the two of you can be sincere to each other and spend the rest of your lives together, Gu Nianji said sincerely. It wasn't impossible. Hadn't Hua Xiao been moved by her in the end? The person she loved finally loved her in the same way she loved him. With such a husband, what more could a woman ask for? Xie Qingying nodded heavily, and a faint blush appeared at the corners of her eyes. I will definitely work hard. Actually, the key to this matter is not me but young Master He. As long as he falls in love with me, I will definitely live with him for the rest of my life. After saying that, she said teasingly, Young Master He is so handsome. Even if I quarrel with him, it's more pleasing to the eye than quarreling with others, isn't it? Gu Nianji couldn't help laughing out loud. This was exactly what she was thinking. It could be seen that she and Xie Qingying were really relatives. They were both obsessed with looks. After sending Gu Nianji back, Xie Qingying took He Jichu's private car back to the He family's mansion. As she walked in, the orderlies were very respectful and polite to her. Xie Qingying sighed in her heart and greeted them politely. She asked, "Where's young Master He?" The chief went back to his room to rest. "Miss Xie, would you like to sit in the living room for a while?" Xie Qingying thought about it and shook her head. "I'll go see young Master He." As she spoke, she walked gracefully into He Jichu's bedroom. He Jichu's bedroom was in his suite. There was a large living room in the outer room. It was even larger than a normal living room. There was a French window on the entire wall, and the curtains were half covered. Xie Qingying walked through the living room and pushed open the door to He Jichu's bedroom. He Jichu had fallen asleep facing the door. His brows were slightly furrowed as if he was troubled even in his sleep. Xie Qingying sighed softly and walked over to sit on the single-seater sofa next to his bed. She took out her phone and started browsing casually. The hottest news on the internet was the white paper on human rights in the Wuxia Empire, released by the U.S. Congress. The netizens were in an uproar. They were all discussing whether they should hand Qin Yaoguang over to avoid revenge from the United States. Xie Qingying was in the new media industry, so she attached great importance to this aspect of public opinion. She looked at it for a while and used her phone to give instructions to her employees. Direct public opinion to the point that we can't surrender to the United States. Attack the capitulators but avoid personal attacks. The capitulators are the best at pretending to be pitiful. If they get a hold of it, they will immediately change the topic. Xie Qingying was a mature entrepreneur. She wouldn't turn down money, but she wouldn't turn down He Jichu either. He Jichu would definitely object to surrendering to the United States and handing over Qin Yaoguang. She would help He Jichu without hesitation. Gu Nianji returned to her apartment and went back to her bedroom at a loss. She lay on the pink and purple chaise longue in her bedroom and let out a long sigh. Her mind was in a mess. For a moment, she was thinking about what she should do to make those big shots believe her and let her help with He Qingjian's surgery. For a moment, she thought that maybe it wasn't a major surgery. Other doctors could do it, so she didn't have to do it herself. Gu Nianji fell asleep while she was lost in her thoughts. At 9:30 in the morning, He Jichu woke up. The bedroom was very quiet. The thick curtains not only blocked out the light but also the noise outside. Of course, the He family's mansion was located in a quiet place, so they couldn't hear the noise of traffic on the road in the distance. In the dim light, the first person he saw when he opened his eyes was Xie Qingying's profile with her head lowered. He stared at her straight and beautiful nose for a while, then sat up on the bed. "Qingying, you're back." Xie Qingying looked up and looked away from her phone. She smiled and said, "I'm back. Did you sleep well? Do you want to sleep a little longer?" He Jichu rubbed his forehead. "No need. My father is about to have surgery. I have to rush to the hospital. I can help you go to the hospital to take care of him. You should sleep a little longer." Xie Qingying looked at He Jichu carefully. Although he had slept, his face was even paler. "I'm not sleepy." He Jichu lifted the blanket and got out of bed. He went to the bathroom to wash up. At 9:45, He Jichu and Xie Qingying arrived at the Military General Hospital in his private car. He Qingjian's ward was a special VIP ward on the highest floor of the hospital building. When He Jichu arrived, there were already several personal secretaries waiting there. "Young Master He." "Chief." One by one they greeted him. He Jichu shook hands with them one by one. Among these people there were his own personal secretaries, He Qingjian's personal secretaries, and the personal secretaries of the military standing committee members. They were all waiting for news here. The corridor on this floor was tightly sealed off. No one was allowed to enter without permission. Nurses had to go through a strict security check before they came to prepare for the surgery. Every doctor and nurse who could come here had to go through the highest level of political review. He Jichu and Xie Qingying sat on the bench in front of the ward and watched the nurses and doctors go in and out. Soon, the red light in front of the operating theater lit up, showing the words "Surgery in Progress." He Jichu's heart also lit up, and he began to feel uneasy. The operating theater was abnormally quiet. It was actually a normal state of the surgery, but He Jichu's eyelids began to twitch unconsciously. He held it in for a while and asked Xie Qingying in a low voice, "Is it the left eyelid or the right eyelid?" Xie Qingying was slightly taken aback, then she laughed. "Young Master He, you believe this too? Aren't you being too superstitious?" He Jichu smiled bitterly and stroked his eyelids. "I hope it's superstition." In the operating theater, An attending doctor was performing a gamma knife surgery in front of the computer. Although the gamma knife was called a knife, it was actually not a physical scalpel. Instead, it used the gamma rays emitted by the radioactive element cobalt-60 to irradiate the lesion in large doses to achieve the effective treatment. He Qingjian's condition was intracranial. In addition to the coronary heart disease, high blood pressure, and cerebral obstruction that were common in the elderly, there was also a small tumor in his brain that was pressing on the blood vessels. He was fainting more and more easily now because the tumor was growing larger and larger, and the pressure on the blood vessels was also increasing. However, the tumor was not a malignant tumor, but a benign one. In theory, as long as the tumor was removed with a gamma knife, it could be cured. However, this was only a theory. To actually remove the tumor without damaging the important blood vessels next to it, a very precise positioning was needed. An error of a millimeter could lead to an error of 1,000 miles. The accuracy of the positioning could be clearly described. The few doctors sitting in front of the color screen nervously stared at the progress of the surgery. Beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. If they were careless and touched a blood vessel, He Qingjian would probably die on the spot in the operating theater. With his status, he was not allowed to make any mistakes. The attending doctor stared at the progress of the surgery on the color screen, not daring to blink. An hour later, his eyes were bloodshot, his heart was beating faster and faster, and his eardrums could even hear the sound of blood gurgling. Gradually, his vision became blurry, and he could barely see the screen in front of him. "What's going on?" he muttered and subconsciously reached forward to touch the screen. However, because he could not see, he did not control his strength well, and with a bang he pushed the instrument in front of him out of position. Although it was only a small movement, it had a huge impact on the instrument. An ear-piercing alarm suddenly rang from He Qingjian's side. The doctors and nurses in the ward turned pale with fright. When the attending doctor, whose vision was blurry just now, heard the alarm, he thought to himself that something had happened. His vision turned black and he fell to the ground. The ward immediately became a mess. A few backup doctors quickly rushed forward and gave He Qingjian emergency treatment. However, He Qingjian had injured an important blood vessel in the brain. For a moment, the intracranial pressure rose rapidly, and blood spread out from the blood vessels. The color screen was covered in red. This was the second update of the day, episode 1847, Careless. Please give me your monthly tickets, moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1859. The red light outside the operating theater suddenly flickered intensely, and the alarm rang, almost tearing everyone's eardrums. Many people involuntarily covered their ears and looked at the dazzling red light outside the operating theater in horror. Yijichu stood up abruptly and rushed to the door of the operating theater. He banged on the door and shouted, "What happened? The people inside are talking." In the operating theater, a few backup doctors looked helplessly at the image on the color screen and the data transmitted by the equipment. Large beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. "What should we do? The blood vessels have already burst. There's something wrong with the gamma rays. The concentration is 100 times higher than the safe range. Hurry up and make a decision. The patient can't be exposed to such a high concentration of gamma rays for too long." The doctors discussed the surgery plan in low voices, their voices trembling slightly. Although they were wearing white masks that covered their entire faces, everyone could see the fear and uneasiness in each other's eyes. The pressure on them to treat a big shot was extraordinary. If something went wrong, they might go to prison. The few of them discussed for 3 minutes. Seeing that the amount of blood in He Qingjian's skull had already reached the warning line, they braced themselves and walked to the door to open it. Yijichu didn't know how he got through those 3 minutes. What flashed through his mind was his father's care and concern for him for so many years. The self-blame and guilt in his heart reached its peak at this moment. He really regretted arguing with his father. His father, who had stood behind him with an indomitable spirit to support him, was already old, sick, and an old man in his twilight years. He was really unfilial. Yijichu leaned his head against the door of the operating theater. His eyes were red, but he didn't shed a single tear. Xie Qingying's heart ached when she saw this. She walked over and stood beside him, holding his arm to accompany him. 3 minutes later, the door of the operating theater opened. Yijichu rushed over and grabbed the throat of the doctor walking at the front. He squeezed out a vulgar word from between his teeth. "What the F***ck are you doing in the operating theater? Waiting to give birth?" The doctor was almost suffocated by Yijichu's strangulation. He used his hand to pry open Yijichu's hand. Half of his mask was pulled off, revealing his flushed face. Xie Qingying staggered from the push and almost fell to the ground. However, when he saw He Jichu strangling the doctor's neck like he had lost his mind, he quickly pounced on him and shouted, "Young Master He! The most important thing now is to save General He." He Jichu snapped back to reality and snorted coldly. He let go of the doctor and threw him to the ground. His brows furrowed as he stared at the doctors behind him and shouted, "What happened? What are you guys dilly-dallying for?" The doctor at the back was so frightened that he immediately said, "Chief, General He's surgery has gone wrong. The gamma knife is slightly off and the blood vessel has ruptured." When He Jichu heard this, his vision darkened and he almost fainted. He used the wall to steady himself and clenched his fists tightly, restraining the urge to rush up and beat someone up. He said word by word, "Then stop the bleeding. What are you doing? Were they waiting for orders from above? You're doctors. Don't you have any professionalism?" The doctors' faces were ashen from He Jichu's scolding. They were in their teens and they stood in a row in shame in front of him. They said, "Chief, we are indeed not professional enough in this area. We don't dare to perform such a precise surgery." He Jichu glared at them and suddenly realized that there was one doctor missing. It was He Qingjian's attending doctor this time. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "Where's the attending doctor? Where is he?" "He fainted, so there was a problem with the surgery," a doctor said in a low voice, ignoring the glances of his colleagues. What he said was the truth. If the attending doctor hadn't suddenly fainted and touched the instrument, how could there have been a problem with the surgery? They had performed a lot of gamma knife surgeries. Even if they weren't the best in the country, they were still among the top 10 doctors. However, He Qingjian's current condition was no longer something that could be solved with gamma knife surgery. Then who can perform this surgery? Who can stop my father's bleeding? He Jichu roared and punched the wall next to the operating theater, causing the back of his hand to bleed. Xie Qingying's heart ached. She quickly ordered the orderly to bring a temporary medicine box over and carefully bandage the back of He Jichu's hand. A doctor looked at his colleague next to him and suddenly mustered up his courage. He said to He Jichu, "Now that things have come to this, we can only let Dr. Qin Yaoguang personally perform the surgery on General He. Dr. Qin Yaoguang is a famous brain surgeon in the world. Only she has a 90% chance of completing this surgery." He Jichu suddenly looked over, his gaze sweeping across his face like an icy thorn. "Qin Yaoguang? Is there no one else in this country? Only Qin Yaoguang can perform this kind of surgery? What exactly did you get from the Qin family?" No. The doctor panicked. He didn't directly receive any benefits from the Qin family, but the Qin family's private hospital was already second only to the public hospital in the country. Although they were military doctors, there would come a day when they would have to transfer to the local hospital. And he was about to transfer to the local hospital. He really wanted to enter the main hospital of the Qin family's private hospital. Therefore, there was no need for the Qin family to take the initiative to bribe him. He would speak up for the Qin family whether intentionally or unintentionally, and fight for a chance for Qin Yaoguang. Besides, Qin Yaoguang was indeed capable. After so many years, they had all seen it for themselves. The doctor stiffened his neck and said, "Chief, you're hurting my heart by saying that. I didn't receive any benefits from the Qin family, but you can't hide your illness for fear of treatment just because you have a personal grudge with the Qin family. You can't prevent General He from receiving the treatment he deserves." He Jichu sneered and pointed at the doctor twice. "Very good, now it's my responsibility. It was clearly your incompetence and dereliction of duty. In the end, it was the patient's family who was unwilling to give the patient effective treatment. Very good, if you're so capable, why are you still a doctor? Get out." The doctor was so angry at He Jichu that he couldn't speak, but He Jichu's words were flawless. If he wanted to argue, how could he argue against He Jichu, who used to be a big lawyer? The other doctors quickly tried to smooth things over. "Don't worry, Chief. He was just giving us a kind suggestion. Actually, Qin Yaoguang wasn't the best candidate. If Mr. Gu Xiangwen hadn't met with an accident back then, he would have been the best at brain surgery. Unfortunately, Mr. Gu Xiangwen is no longer alive, so we can only look for Qin Yaoguang." He Jichu's eyelids twitched. "Who are you talking about? Gu Xiangwen? It's a pity that he's already passed away." The doctor shook his head again. "Actually, we've been doctors for so many years. Even if we're not skilled enough, we still have a good eye. It's obvious who's skilled, who's not, who's skilled, who's skilled, who's skilled. Dr. Qin Yaoguang does have some skills, but her skills aren't enough in front of Mr. Gu Xiangwen. Yes, yes, yes. More than 10 years ago, we saw Mr. Gu Xiangwen demonstrate a brain surgery. It could only be said to be a perfect textbook template. We still use it to make instructional videos. It's a pity that Mr. Gu Xiangwen's ambition isn't in medicine, but in high-energy physics. Stop talking. Who doesn't know what Gu Xiangwen did? He's a wanted criminal. The doctor who had recommended Qin Yaoguang growled angrily. He didn't want to hear anyone say good things about Gu Xiangwen. The other doctors saw that he was being tactless. They had clearly helped him out, but he refuted everyone's opinions. He was really shameless. Therefore the other doctors kept quiet. He Jichu's expression was uncertain. He thought about it for a while and suddenly said, "You guys should go back and check on my father's condition. I'll go make a call." He asked them again, "How long can he last?" One of the doctors said, "At most an hour." After an hour, even if Gu Xiangwen comes back to life, he won't be able to save him. He Jichu pursed his lips and nodded. "You guys go in first. You stay." He Jichu kept the doctor who had recommended Qin Yaoguang and ordered his orderly, "Guard him. Remember not to let anyone near him. If anything happens to him, you'll be held accountable." "Yes, Chief." "Why are you guarding me? What did I do? Can't I even say a word? Are you trying to start a literary inquisition?" Of course, the doctor didn't want to be guarded. He made a ruckus and refused to leave with the orderly. The orderly didn't want to reason with him. He took out some tape and sealed his mouth before taking him away. Ijichu walked to the corridor on the side, took out his phone and called Gunyenji. Gunyenji was in the middle of her dreams when she heard her phone ringing. She groped for it and answered the call. Sleepily she said, "Hello." Hijichu composed himself and said softly, "Nyenji, there's a big problem with my father's surgery. There's an intracranial hemorrhage and he's been exposed to gamma rays for too long." Gunyenji woke up and sat up straight. She said anxiously, "Then what should we do?" What she was most worried about had happened, but there was nothing she could do. Hijichu closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Nyenji, can you do me a favor?" Gunyenji quickly said, "No problem as long as I can help." "Okay. I want to ask the doctor who performed the gunshot surgery on you in H City to operate on my father. I know you know that person and where he is." Hijichu looked at his watch. "My father still has an hour left. After an hour, even if your father, Gu Xiangwen, comes back to life, he won't be able to be saved." Gunyenji's heart pounded. What did Hijichu mean? Had he sensed something? This is the first update of the day, episode 1848, Detection. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. It's the third update today. The second update at 1 p.m. will be for Imam 1313, to be promoted to the leader of the alliance in April. There will be the third update at 8 p.m. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1860. Gunyenji's face gradually lost its color and turned snow white. It was translucent like ice jade porcelain. She held her phone, her mind in a mess. She didn't know how to respond. Hijichu said slowly, "I promise you on my life that I will never pursue that person's identity, nor will I try to find out where he is. I'm just asking you as a son who is worried about his father's life to do me a favor. For the sake of my mother, Qin Suan, do me a favor." Hijichu waited quietly for a while before Gunyenji said with difficulty, "Young master, don't say that. I'll find that person's contact information. But I can't guarantee. Nyenji, I only have an hour. I'll be grateful if you're willing to look for him. If you're not willing, I won't force you. This isn't your fault. It was a freak accident," Hijichu said again. If Gunyenji and the person behind her refused to help, Hijichu wouldn't hold a grudge against her. All the blame would be placed on Qin Yaoguang and the Qin family. Qin Corporation's private hospital, this kind of big and unruly thing shouldn't exist. Hijichu hung up the phone and leaned against the wall in the corridor, silently waiting for Gunyenji's reply. Gunyenji put down the phone and was stunned for only a second. She rushed out of the bedroom and came to the door of her small study. Lu Jin was concentrating on programming in front of the computer. Gunyenji choked when she saw his thin and tall back. She stretched out her finger and gently knocked on the door. "Dad." Lu Jin turned around. "Nyenji? What's wrong? Come in, come in." He turned from the computer and smiled at Gunyenji. Gunyenji walked up to him and suddenly half knelt in front of him. She rested her head on his knee and said fondly, "Dad, it's so good that you're still alive." Lu Jin laughed and reached out to rub her head. "Yes, I think it's good too. But if it weren't for Boss Lu, you wouldn't have been able to see your weak, helpless, and pitiful father. Gu Nianji, weak, pitiful, and helpless? Exo? How could Lu Jin have the face to say such a thing? Lu Jin Gu Xiangwen, who was able to single-handedly solve the magnetic resonance of two worlds, who was able to research the perfect gene, and who was a two-time Nobel Prize laureate who was comparable to an army, actually said that he was weak, pitiful, and helpless. Gu Nianji's emotions were completely gone. She stood up expressionlessly and said, "Dad, don't go online if you don't have anything to do. Is it fun to learn so many emoticons? I think it's very interesting." Lu Jin took off his eyes and wiped them. He said very seriously, "The language of the emoticon is concise, but it has a profound meaning. Moreover, ordinary people can understand it. It has the most powerful characteristic of language, which is that it is easy to understand, widely circulated, and very lively." He didn't want to listen to any folklore studies related to language at all. Gu Nianji waved her hand and said in one breath, "Dad, General He Qingjian's gamma knife surgery just failed. He's now suffering from intracranial hemorrhage. The situation is very urgent and serious." Lu Jin scoffed. "Then he's really unlucky. I think they'll have to ask his ex-wife, Qin Yaoguang, to save his life, right?" Gu Nianji was a little surprised. If that was the case, no wonder He Jichu would rather ask her to ask Lu Jin to help save him than ask Qin Yaoguang. She didn't comment and just asked directly, "Dad, do you want to help him?" Lu Jin rolled his eyes. "Why should I help him? When he put me on the wanted list, he never thought of letting me go." "Really?" Gu Nianji raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say that you deserved it? But I see that you still have a lot of resentment. If you really deserved it, shouldn't you think of a way to atone for your sins?" Lu Jin stared at Gu Nianji dumbfounded. His daughter was too smart, but it was also tiring. Her eloquence and intelligence must not have come from him. It must have come from her mother. Lu Jin was a little dazed when he thought of the equally eloquent, generous, and intelligent woman. Gu Nianji took the opportunity to bend down in front of him and said, "Dad, just do me a favor. I'll return the favor in the future." Lu Jin came back to his senses and pinched her little face. "Look at how capable you are. He Jichu is causing trouble for you, isn't he? Did he recognize me?" Gu Nianji, she denied it flatly. "No, why would you think that?" "No. Lu Jin rolled his eyes disapprovingly. "Other than me, who else would have the ability to save you from such a serious gunshot wound? Other than me, who else could expose the relationship between the Rollers and the Qin family? Other than me?" Gu Nianji's head hurt from listening to this. She quickly made a pause gesture to stop Lu Jin from boasting. Stop. I know you're very powerful. Just give me a definite answer. Are you going or not? It's only an hour anyway and 10 minutes have already passed." Gu Nianji stretched out her wrist and showed Lu Jin her watch. "Look, there's still 50 minutes left. In 50 minutes you won't be able to save him even if you want to. It's that serious? He's actually going to die soon?" Lu Jin became serious. "It's just a gamma knife surgery. Did those people's brains degenerate from too much gamma radiation?" Gu Nianji, it seemed like the person being irradiated by the gamma knife was He Qingjian. Lu Jin stood up from his seat and said, "I'll go back and modify myself. You'll come with me later." Gu Nianji was both happy and worried. "Dad, are you really going? But what if General He finds out about you?" "He won't find me." Lu Jin was very confident. "I'll give him deep anesthesia the entire time. He won't wake up until 5 days later." Gu Nianji. Lu Jin quickly returned to his room and smeared some special material on his face. Soon, his appearance completely changed, and even the equipment couldn't detect that he had disguised himself. This was because the material he used for the modification was bioengineered and completely matched his own DNA. Gu Nianji quickly called He Jichu. "Young Master He, prepare the surgical equipment. No one else should be in the operating room. No recordings. Turn off all the surveillance cameras. I'll go in and help him." He Jichu heaved a sigh of relief. Not only was his forehead covered in beads of sweat, but even his back was drenched. However, Gu Nianji finally agreed. He Jichu nodded. "I'll get someone to set it up right away. But I have to go in and help too." It wasn't that he was worried, but that He Qingjian's security level was too high. There should be surveillance cameras when he was performing the surgery. If he wanted to turn off the surveillance cameras, there had to be someone he could trust to monitor the entire process. Who else was more suitable than He Qingjian's biological son, He Jichu, to monitor him from inside? Gu Nianji didn't ask further. He Jichu already knew anyway, so she didn't say anything else. She nodded. Send someone to wait at the entrance of the Friendship Mall on 3rd Ring Road. We'll meet there. Then Hijichu would send a police car to clear the way to ensure that they had a smooth journey. Gunyenji came out after the call and saw a complete stranger standing in front of her with a smile. Gunyenji was extremely surprised. After staring at him for a long time, she asked tentatively, "That?" The man laughed loudly and even his voice changed. Gunyenji shook her head in amazement. Lu Yuan walked over and asked worriedly, "Is it safe? How did young master he know?" Gunyenji said embarrassedly, "I implicated Dad. Otherwise, young master he wouldn't have found out." She told him about the surgery. Lu Yuan laughed. "It has nothing to do with you. Hijichu is quite smart." He didn't want to follow him because if he did, Lu Jin would be completely exposed. For now, Lu Yuan analyzed that Hijichu might have guessed that Gu Xiangwen was still alive, but he probably hadn't connected Lu Jin to Gu Xiangwen for the time being. Perhaps Hijichu would connect the two of them in the future but not now. They weren't ready yet. Gunyenji and the modified Lu Jin arrived at the Friendship Mall. A shiny black Rolls-Royce Phantom, 2 police cars, and a police motorcycle were already waiting there. The person driving the Rolls-Royce Phantom was Hijichu's driver. Gunyenji greeted him and got into the car with Lu Jin. The police car in front opened the way, and the police car behind escorted them. They drove Gunyenji and Lu Jin to the Military General Hospital at lightning speed. Along the way the cars made way. They didn't know which important person was visiting. This was today's second update. It was sent by Imam 1313 to the Alliance leader in April. Episode 1849, Important Persons Visit. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. It was the third update today. There would be the third update at 8 o'clock in the evening. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1861. Because of the urgency of the situation, everyone in the imperial capital gave the green light to this matter. It only took 10 minutes to send Lu Jin and Gunyenji from the entrance of the Friendship Mall on the 3rd Ring Road to the Military General Hospital. Gunyenji and Lu Jin's car drove all the way in and stopped in front of a building in the Military General Hospital. Yichengjian was undergoing surgery on the top floor of the building. Yijichu came out of the building anxiously. He saw a tall and thin man standing beside Gunyenji. Although he didn't look impressive, he had an arrogant and desolate aura. He was definitely the mysterious man who had saved Gunyenji. He was also gradually matching the figure of the person in his memory, although his appearance was completely different. However, for people like Hijichu, appearance had never been an important feature to determine a person's true identity. He reached out his hand. "Hello, I'm Hijichu. Thank you for taking the time to come and help my father with the surgery." Lu Jin didn't shake his hand. He frowned and said, "Don't be so modest. Hurry up and save him." Hijichu wasn't angry at all. Instead, he breathed a sigh of relief. "This way, please. My father is on the top floor." Xie Qingying hurried out of the building and saw Hijichu respectfully inviting a tall and thin man in. Gunyenji stood nervously beside the man. Xie Qingying quickly walked over and nodded to Gunyenji and the man. "Hello, uncle, he is upstairs. Young master, he and I can take you up." Gunyenji was about to say thank you when Lu Jin rolled his eyes at Xie Qingying. "The elevator is too crowded. Unrelated people shouldn't follow." He then muttered, "I can't stand some people pretending to be generous. Is she close to you? Being the mistress of the He family isn't something that just anyone can be." His voice wasn't soft at all and he didn't try to hide it. Everyone knew who he was talking about. Xie Qingying blushed. Gunyenji coughed lightly and pulled Xie Qingying into the elevator with a smile. "Cousin, don't be angry. This gentleman has a bad temper and is arrogant. He often speaks in such a strange tone. I'm used to it." Then he winked at Xie Qingying. Xie Qingying took the opportunity to step down. "Really? Capable people always have a special personality because they have the right to be arrogant." "Cousin is right." Gunyenji smiled and pulled Xie Qingying to a corner of the elevator, leaving most of the space for Lu Jin and Hijichu. As the elevator rose, Hijichu had already told Lu Jin what had happened in a few words. He asked, "Sir, what's your surname? How should I address you?" Lu Jin waved his hand and said impatiently, "I'm here to save your father's life. I didn't introduce you." Hijichu, Gunyenji rubbed her forehead and had no choice but to help Lu Jin smooth things over. She changed the topic and said, "Young Master He, the attending doctor suddenly fainted, causing the surgery to fail. Do you want to hold him accountable?" They will definitely be held accountable. I've already sent people to investigate who these doctors have been meeting these days and what they've been doing to see if there are any clues. Although there was a strict background check before the surgery, it was to check the family and history of these people. They had indeed neglected to check the recent situation. Soon the elevator door opened and they arrived at the top floor. Lu Jin and He Jichu walked out of the elevator first, followed by Gu Nianji and Xie Qingying. Lu Jin turned around and called out to Gu Nianji, "Come with me to prepare for the surgery. Remember to disinfect and change your clothes." Gu Nianji quickly nodded. "Okay, I'll be right there." He Jichu gave a few instructions to his personal secretary outside and also went in to disinfect and change into his surgical gown before entering the operating theater. In the operating theater that was as white as a snow cave, Lu Jin wore a big green mask and a white coat. He stood expressionlessly under the shadowless lamp and looked at He Chengjian, who was lying on the hospital bed. He hadn't seen this person on TV for more than 10 days, but he realized that he had already become a lot more haggard. He was completely different from the vibrant figure in his memories. Lu Jin pursed his lips and stretched out his hands. "Prepare for the surgery. Anesthetize the patient first." Because Lu Jin didn't want anyone else in the operating theater, he did the entire process alone. Gu Nianji and He Jichu just watched from the sidelines. Gu Nianji also had the additional function of handing Lu Jin the surgical equipment. Gu Nianji quickly brought Lu Jin the anesthetic tray that had been marked on the side. All kinds of anesthetic injections were already prepared. He Jichu helped her hang the bottle on the side of the infusion tube. Lu Jin picked up a very thick syringe and began to inject him with anesthesia. He inserted it into the deep vein. This was originally what the anesthetist was supposed to do, but Lu Jin did it all by himself. After the anesthesia, while waiting for the anesthesia to take effect, Lu Jin used a machine to shave off all of He Chengjian's hair. Then he drew lines on He Chengjian's head and placed a headrest to fix his brain in place. The next step was to operate the machine to open the skull. The human skull was very hard and craniotomy was very risky. If one wasn't careful, it could easily cause all kinds of side effects such as aphasia, amnesia, blindness, hemiplegia, sensory disorders, mental disorders, and so on. In serious cases, it could even lead to death. Therefore, the hospital usually wouldn't perform craniotomy unless it was absolutely necessary. But with He Chengjian's current situation, he had no choice but to open the skull. He Jichu held his breath as he watched Lu Jin perform the surgery. Although he already knew who this person was and that he was a genius, after watching his surgery, he realized that the word genius alone couldn't describe this person's ability. Although he wasn't a specialist and probably hadn't performed many surgeries in all these years, as soon as he stood in front of the operating table, his ability and skills returned. All the techniques were in his mind. No matter who he was now and no matter how many of his possessions they took away, they couldn't take away the knowledge in his mind. Lu Jin used the machine to open a triangular skull on top of He Chengjian's head. Then he began to clear the intracranial congestion. He removed the embolism from He Chengjian's severely blocked blood vessels, and even used a very delicate technique to repair the ruptured blood vessels. Lu Jin didn't use the artificial blood vessels that everyone commonly used to repair the cerebral vessels. Instead, he used a method that he had developed himself to allow the patient's cerebral vessels to heal automatically. This way there wouldn't be any rejection after the surgery. Brain surgery was indeed one of the surgeries that required the highest level of precision. Qin Yaoguang had been famous for this for a long time because she had a pair of very dexterous hands. The aftereffects of her brain surgery were very small, almost negligible, and her recovery was very good. But for Lu Jin, it wasn't that the aftereffects were very small, but that there would be no aftereffects at all. He Jichu watched every step of his surgery. The more he watched, the more he admired him. An hour later, Lu Jin sewed up He Chengjian's skull and said to He Jichu, "When do you think your father will recover?" He Jichu, how could he ask for this? Gu Nianji curled her lips and said proudly, "What this gentleman means is that he can control the patient's recovery. If you want your father to recover in 3 days, then he can recover in 3 days. If he wants to recover in half a month, then he can recover in half a month. There won't be any side effects." He Jichu glanced at her and pursed his lips. He said in a low voice, "I hope he can recover in half a month." There had been too many things happening recently, so He Jichu didn't want He Chengjian to worry too much. Lu Jin rolled his eyes again. "You're underestimating my methods too much if he only recovers in half a month. 5 days. When he wakes up from the anesthesia in 5 days, he'll definitely be fine." "Really? He'll really be fine?" He Jichu was so surprised that he lost his composure. But apart from the benign tumor in my father's brain, he also has coronary heart disease, high blood pressure, and brain obstruction. Lu Jin had already gone to the side to wash his hands. He said casually, high blood pressure and coronary heart disease can't be cured in a short period of time, but the brain obstruction is completely gone. Also, his benign tumor has been removed, but the brain cells have been exposed to gamma rays for a long time. You'd better do postoperative observation and care to ensure that no cancerous cells appear. He Jichu's expression changed and he immediately said, okay, can you write a detailed medical order? Lu Jin pointed at Gun Yanji and said, you do it. I'll talk. You type and use the computer to record it. Gun Yanji understood. She wore transparent plastic gloves and found a computer. She began to type in Lu Jin's medical order. Soon the medical order was finished. She saved and printed out a copy and handed it to He Jichu. He Jichu bowed to Lu Jin at a 90-degree angle as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. Thank you for saving my father. If you need any help, feel free to ask. Lu Jin said casually, it's fine as long as you and your son don't cause trouble for me. I don't need your help. Gun Yanji was anxious. How could he say that? He was just short of writing the words, I'm Gu Xiangwen, on his forehead. He Jichu smiled slightly and said, I know. I'm not someone who returns kindness with enmity. Only then did Lu Jin realize that he had let the cat out of the bag. He threw away the towel and quickly slipped away. This was the third watch of the day, the 1850th, slipped away. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. It was the third watch of the day. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1862. Gun Yanji was extremely embarrassed. If there was a crack in the ground, she would have crawled into it. He Jichu put his hands behind his back as he watched the doctor quickly slip away. He glanced at Gun Yanji and couldn't help laughing. What's wrong with you? Your friend is quite interesting. Gun Yanji laughed dryly. Young master you have to remember what you said to me. Of course I remember. I owe you a favor for this. He Jichu took off his mask. The surgery should be very successful. I'll call the doctors in to deal with the aftermath. Gun Yanji nodded. Then you can turn on your surveillance cameras. Aren't you going to watch from the side? He Jichu hesitated for a moment but nodded. I do have to watch from the side. He then said in a low voice, I didn't expect that even the military hospital would be infiltrated by the Qin Corporation's private hospital. Gun Yanji sighed. Can't be said to be infiltrated. They're all in the same system. They're all medical systems. Military doctors can't be military doctors for the rest of their lives. They have to find a way out for themselves. It's all because the country allows private hospitals. It's really, sigh. He Jichu put on his mask again and said coldly, the country is already reconsidering this matter. No matter what, there's definitely something wrong with the Qin Corporation's private hospital. Gun Yanji didn't say anything else. It's good that you know what you're doing. She hurriedly followed Lu Jin's footsteps and walked out. When she arrived at the door, she saw Xie Qingying looking into the operating theater with concern. When she saw Gun Yanji come out, Xie Qingying quickly went forward and asked, Yanji, how's General He? Gun Yanji knew that Lu Jin must have ignored Xie Qingying. Otherwise, Lu Jin would have gone out first, and Xie Qingying wouldn't have asked her. Gun Yanji didn't mind and glanced into the operating theater. The surgery was very successful. General He is recovering. The doctors still have to go in to record his data, and then he will be transferred to the rehabilitation ward. Xie Qingying sighed and put her palms together. She muttered to the sky, God bless. Gun Yanji had just walked over when she heard this. She turned to look at her. Cousin Xie still believes in God? Xie Qingying retracted her hand and smiled. I didn't believe it at first, but this time, it's better to believe it. From the corner of her eye, she saw that Lu Jin had already entered the elevator and was waiting for her impatiently. She nodded at Xie Qingying. Yes, that makes sense, but I'll be leaving first. She ran a few steps, entered the elevator and went down with Lu Jin. One of He Jichu's personal secretaries was also in the elevator. It was the person who had picked them up at the entrance of the Friendship Mall. The man walked Gun Yanji and Lu Jin back to the entrance of the Friendship Mall and said, Do you still get off here? Gun Yanji smiled and thanked him. Yeah, I still have to go buy something. You can go back first. The man opened the car door for them and watched them enter the mall before driving away. As soon as he left, a few plainclothes personnel immediately followed Gun Yanji and Lu Jin into the mall. Lu Jin had already taken off his doctor's scrubs. He was only wearing a pair of sunglasses, a casual striped shirt, khaki pants, and a pair of Under Armour's white sneakers. Leisurely strolled through the mall. Gu Nianji and Lu Jin parted ways at the staircase of the mall. She went to the women's clothing store and jewelry store on the second floor, while Lu Jin went to the electronic equipment store and bookstore on the first floor. The people following them had to split into two groups to follow Gu Nianji and Lu Jin. But soon they realized that there were too many people in the mall. Their location was no longer useful. They watched as Gu Nianji and the mysterious doctor disappeared into the bustling crowd of the mall, never to be found again. These people had no choice but to disperse to the exit. At the other exit of the mall, Lu Jin had already changed his appearance. He was wearing a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and a suit as he walked out. He deliberately brushed past a plainclothes man who was following him. The man had no idea that his target had just walked past him. Lu Jin calmly got into Lu Yuan's car that had come to pick him up. He smiled and said, "These people are too useless. They can't compare to you, Boss Lu." Lu Yuan snorted. "They're not bad. If I hadn't come to pick you up, you would have been discovered by them." Lu Jin pursed his lips and said unwillingly, I didn't expect He Jichu to have such a trick up his sleeve." "No, they're not from the He family." Lu Yuan shook his head. "These are the subordinates of a few other big shots in the military. They probably don't have any ill intentions. They're just worried about He Qingjian's condition, so they want to know your whereabouts and identity." "They still have to worry about my surgery?" Lu Jin scoffed. "What groundless fears. They don't know it's you, Boss Gu Xiangguan." Lu Yuan glanced at Lu Jin, who was sitting in the back seat, through the rearview mirror. He narrowed his eyes and smiled. "If you dare to reveal your real identity to them, they definitely won't take photos of you and follow you. They'll only treat you as a guest of honor." Lu Jin chuckled. "A guest of honor? That's more like a prisoner. You're quite self-aware." Lu Yuan smiled. "You have a very accurate understanding and positioning of yourself." Lu Jin was about to speak when he saw Lu Yuan drive around and stop in the parking lot of another mall across the street. Not long after, Gu Nianji opened the car door and sat in. She sighed and said, "Young master, he is so unscrupulous. He actually sent someone to follow us." "They're not from the He family." Lu Yuan patted the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator. "I just told your father that they're the subordinates of a few big shots in the military. It should be about the surgery. There's still after-sales service when you buy things in the mall. You guys performed such a major surgery and left with a wave of your hand. If something goes wrong, who are they going to look for?" Gu Nianji replied with an "Oh. I see. I've wronged young master He." She had been quite angry and had even planned to ignore He Jichu again. Now that she heard Lu Yuan's words, she finally understood. However, she asked curiously, "But Xiao Lu, how do you know so well?" Lu Jin scoffed. "That's what he does. He's sneaky all day long, asking about other people's situation. He's been keeping a close eye on these big shots." Gu Nianji couldn't figure out how Lu Yuan, as a businessman, could pay attention to the situation of these big shots in the military. However, she also knew that before Lu Yuan came to this world, he was the same existence as Hua Xiaoheng in the other world. In fact, he was more than 10 years older than Hua Xiaoheng, so his skills must be even more profound. Therefore, she didn't ask any more. There were specializations in the industry, and this was his specialty, just like her specialty was law. Thinking of her specialty, Gu Nianji had an idea and said excitedly, "I've thought of a way to fight back against the white paper on human rights in China released by the Americans." Lu Yuan glanced at her. "What do you want to do?" Gu Nianji took out her phone and twirled it in her hand. She smiled and said, "Of course it's to hold a public trial for Qin Yaoguang." Lu Yuan frowned. "No, the things that Qin Yaoguang was involved in can't be made public." Lu Jin was also uncharacteristically not supportive of Gu Nianji's words unconditionally. Instead, he said very seriously, "Boss Lu is right. Qin Yaoguang's case can't be made public. Whether it's her previous case related to infrasonic weapons or her kidnapping of you 8 years ago, it can't be made public. The former case involved He Jichu, a high-ranking general. It was impossible for the whole world to know the whole story of the case. The latter case involved Gu Nianji's unusual mother-daughter relationship with Qin Yaoguang, so she couldn't let others know about her special existence. Lu Jin had gone through so much trouble to go to New York with the idea of perishing together with Lorraine. He wanted to eliminate the source of the matter. However, he was later stopped by Gu Nianji, Hua Xiaoheng, and Lu Yuan. Only then did they use a more sensible method to solve the matter. However, Lorraine's side had been temporarily stabilized. They couldn't be considered to have succeeded yet. That was because there were still two people in the country, Qin Yaoguang and Qin Beihui. They knew about Gu Nianji's special constitution and genes. If these two people weren't eliminated, Gu Nianji's safety wouldn't be guaranteed. However, Lorraine still played them. She used the U.S. Congress to push Qin Yaoguang to the front of the stage and embarrass the entire Wuxia Empire. Now, they couldn't even secretly get rid of Qin Yaoguang, because this would confirm what the U.S. Congress had said in the Wuxia Human Rights White Paper. Therefore, they couldn't use secret methods to deal with Qin Yaoguang and Qin Beihui. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and instinctively pinched her fingers a few times. She looked at Lu Jin tentatively and said, "Dad, I've thought of a way to deal with Qin Yaoguang. This method will involve someone. Can you promise me not to object? I can guarantee that I will never do anything disrespectful to you or the person you admire the most." Lu Jin was confused and looked at her suspiciously. "Nianji, what are you thinking? What, me and the person I admire? Who is the person I admire in this world?" Lu Yuan glanced at the rearview mirror without batting an eyelid. Lu Jin sensed it and immediately covered his lips with his hand. He coughed and said, "Of course. Other than Boss Lu, is Boss Lu related to Qin Yaoguang and Qin Beihui?" Gu Nianji turned to look at him from the front passenger seat and said calmly, "Of course." Gu Nianji turned to look at him from the front passenger seat and said calmly, "I want to sue Qin Yaoguang for killing Qin Suwen." "What?" Lu Jin jumped up in shock, but the seat belt on his waist and shoulder pulled him back. He grunted and clutched his chest as he said nervously, "Nonsense. You know very well that Qin Yaoguang didn't kill Su Wen." "Who knows? Now I think she killed her, so I want to sue her and then I want to find out if it was her." Gu Nianji said faintly, "This is a criminal case. It has nothing to do with military secrets and it has nothing to do with me. We can use this opportunity to try Qin Yaoguang in public, and then drag Qin Beihui, the entire Qin family and the Qin private hospital into it." Lu Jin gritted his teeth and glared at Gu Nianji. "How many times have I told you? I was the one who killed Su Wen. If you bring up what happened back then, I'll turn myself in." Gu Nianji didn't stop him this time. She nodded. "Okay, you turn yourself in and then I'll fight the lawsuit for you. In order to prove that you're not the murderer, I have to find a new murderer." This is Section 101 of Criminal Cases. Introduce a new suspect, find a new suspect. Lu Jin's identity had already been exposed to He Jichu. He Chengjian was in a coma and recovering, and Qin Yaoguang and Qin Beihui had already reached the point where the dagger was revealed. Gu Nianji suddenly realized that there was no better time than now to clear the guilt that Lu Jin, her father, Gu Xiangwen, shouldn't bear. This is the first update of the day, issue 1851, The Person I Admire the Most. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation tickets. Today is Monday, especially recommendation tickets. Today is still the third update. The second update will be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon for the 50,000 Chidian dollars that Suzuai had tipped in April. There will be the third update at 8 o'clock in the evening. Kiss me, little angels. Chapter 1863. Lu Jin looked at Gu Nianji with his mouth agape. For the first time he realized that his threat didn't work. Not only did it not work, but Gu Nianji had a new way to force him back. Lu Jin became anxious and his facial features scrunched up. He said to Gu Nianji in an almost pleading tone, "Nianji, I beg you, don't mention this again. I'm doing very well now and I don't want to go back to Gu Xiangwen's era. Actually, Gu Xiangwen isn't as good as you think. He also did something wrong, so he used his life to make up for it." Gu Nianji raised an eyebrow. "Dad, why don't you tell me in detail what happened at that time?" Lu Jin shook his head desperately. I can't say it. Nianji, I can't say it." "You can't?" Gu Nianji pursed her lips. "You don't want to say it, right? Is there anything else I don't know?" "There are a lot of things you don't know." Lu Jin became serious. "When I set up the joint laboratory with Qin Yaoguang, I did a lot of illegal things to give birth to you. Do you want to hear all of them?" Gu Nianji quickly made a pause gesture. Stop. Dad, it's fine if you don't want to tell me. I'll find a way to find out the truth about Qin Suwen's death. The truth is that she died because of me. If you really want to uncover this matter, you'll have to step over my dead body." Lu Jin saw that surrendering himself wouldn't make Gu Nianji stop, so he had no choice but to use his strongest move. Gu Nianji was slightly stunned. She didn't understand why Lu Jin wouldn't allow her to mention Qin Suwen's death. However, Lu Yuan understood Lu Jin's mentality a little. He coughed lightly and said, Nianji, don't worry. Let's go back and think about it. Gu Nianji suppressed the doubts in her heart and nodded. Okay, President Liu. We'll discuss it when we get back. When they returned to the apartment building where they lived, Gu Nianji looked at Lu Jin, who was returning to his apartment with a gloomy expression. She looked at Lu Yuan thoughtfully. Lu Yuan nodded at her. Come with me. Lu Yuan took her to his apartment. There were 3 apartments on this floor, all of which were bought by Lu Yuan and Lu Jin. Lu Yuan's own apartment was very distinctive. All the decorations were very standard. There was nothing particularly outstanding, nor was there anything particularly ugly. It was a very common decoration and furnishings. After a glance, people would have no impression of it at all. It was just like their own house. After looking at it for a long time, they would become numb. He had the ability to fade into the crowd. Gu Nianji sat down in Lu Yuan's living room. Seeing Lu Yuan sitting opposite her, she asked in a low voice, "Co Lu, do you know what's going on?" Lu Yuan recalled what had happened at that time, and there was still a look of pity on his face. He wiped his face with his hand and said very gently, "That was more than 10 years ago. I'm not very clear about it, but I was already here at that time, so I still know a little bit about it." Gu Nianji perked up and quickly said, "President Liu, please tell me. It doesn't matter if it's just a little information. I just want to know how my father was blamed for Qin Suwen's death." Your father, to be precise, started as a material witness in this case. Because the last person Qin Suwen saw before she died was your father. After He Qingjian reported the case, the police wanted your father to assist in the investigation. In the end, he immediately fled to my place and asked me if there was any way he could escape the police's pursuit. It was because he escaped that the police upgraded him from an important witness to an important suspect and increased the intensity of his arrest. Gu Nianji was speechless. After being depressed for a long time, she said, "He didn't kill her. Why did he escape?" Your father has always insisted that Qin Suwen's death had something to do with him. All these years he has been doing all kinds of things to atone for his sins. He once said that he wouldn't investigate anything. He would let these things sink to the bottom of the sea with the loss of some of the documents. The loss of the documents? What's going on? What kind of documents are they? Gu Nianji quickly asked. She had already automatically entered lawyer mode. Lu Yuan tilted his head and thought for a moment. He said, "I actually don't know what exactly happened and I didn't ask. Since he came to join me, I invited him to do business with me and gave him shares. But Lu Jin quit after 1 day of work. He said that he was still suitable for scientific research. Later I asked him to be the boss behind the scenes. I asked him to invest in technology and start an online security company with me. His technology was too advanced. I gave him more than half of the shares in the hope that I could keep him." Gu Nianji listened with relish, but even after Lu Yuan finished, Gu Nianji didn't hear the reason she wanted to hear. She couldn't help asking, "Why would my father rather bear the reputation of an important suspect than bring up Qin Suwen's case again?" Qin Suwen died suddenly. "There's no doubt about that," Lu Yuan said firmly. Lu Yuan said firmly, "Your father isn't someone who likes to do things casually, so if he says that he did something, then he must have done it." "That's not necessarily true." Gu Nianji leaned back on the sofa disapprovingly. "He once told me that he wasn't my father." Lu Yuan, this sentence was really hard to wash away. Lu Yuan's teeth hurt. In the end, he could only brace himself and say, "Your father thought that you couldn't acknowledge each other, so he didn't admit his true identity." "It's fine now. What else can't he say?" Gu Nianji asked in confusion. "Is it because I might be his and Qin Suwen's biological daughter?" Lu Yuan looked away awkwardly and said, "This matter is still in the guessing stage, right? Do you have evidence to prove that you're Qin Suwen's biological daughter?" Gu Nianji laughed. "Of course I have evidence, and actually, we only need to verify the DNA to confirm the paternity. But you also know that my DNA is rather special. Young Master He, Young Master Hua, and my father spent so much effort to hide my DNA. I can't take the risk of exposing this matter again." Lu Yuan nodded in relief. "It's good that you know. Then how do you plan to fight this lawsuit?" Gu Nianji shrugged nonchalantly. "This case has actually already been filed in court, and it's still valid." Lu Yuan didn't know much about the law, but he smiled and looked at Gu Nianji as she talked non-stop. Like a kind elder, he asked softly, "After so many years, hasn't the retroactive period passed yet?" Gu Nianji shook her head. "This is a criminal case. If a human life is involved, there's no retroactive period. In other words, as long as the case isn't solved, it can't be closed. It can only stay in the cold palace. Lu Yuan nodded. It's good that there's no retroactive period. Otherwise, if Qin Suan was murdered, the murderer would get away with it. Speaking of this, Gunyanji couldn't help complaining, this person is so lucky. He actually has someone like my father as a scapegoat. She waved her arm. If I find out who he is, I'll definitely teach him a lesson. The law will make them pay, Lu Yuan reminded her. But now you insist that Qin Yaoguang is the murderer. Have you thought of how to convince the court to accept your argument? That's why I need Dad's help. Only if he gives me the most detailed clues can I think of a way to restore the truth. Lu Jin also felt uneasy. He wanted to talk to Lu Yuan and ask him to help him or think of a way to deal with Gunyanji. He didn't expect Gunyanji to be one step ahead of him and come to Lu Yuan's place to ask questions. Lu Jin listened silently at the door and Lu Yuan didn't stop him. Gunyanji sat with her back to the door and didn't know Lu Jin had come. It wasn't until he heard Gunyanji say that she wanted to restore the truth of the past that Lu Jin said, I was the one who directly caused Qin Suan's death. Nyenji, what truth do you want to hear? Dad, are you willing to tell me? Gunyanji was surprised and delighted. She got up from the sofa and ran over to Lu Jin to hold his hand. Lu Jin's hand was cold. Gunyanji was shocked and quickly said, Dad, can you sit down? Lu Jin pushed her hand away and frowned. What exactly do you want? I said this has nothing to do with Qin Yaoguang. How can you say it has nothing to do with her? Gunyanji was finally angry. She took out her phone and found the photo of Qin Suan when she was a child. She handed it to Lu Jin and said in a low voice, Then explain why Qin Suan's photo when she was a child looks so much like me. And why did Qin Yaoguang do plastic surgery to look like Qin Suan? This was today's second update. The 50,000 Chidian dollars that Suzuwai had tipped in April had arrived. Chapter 1852, The Dagger is Revealed. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today was Monday, especially recommendation votes. There was a third update at 8 p.m. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1864. Lu Jin's eyes widened as he looked at the old yellowed photo on Gunyanji's phone. He reached out with a trembling hand and stroked the phone screen. He stammered, Where did this photo come from? You don't have to worry about that. It's not like we haven't done anything recently. Gunyanji wanted to take her phone back, but Lu Jin grabbed it and refused to let go. His gaze was filled with longing, and he wished he could imprint the photo in his heart. Seeing Lu Jin like this, Gunyanji couldn't bear to take the phone away. She sighed and said, Do you know what Qin Suan looked like when she was young? Lu Jin shook his head subconsciously. You don't know? Gunyanji raised an eyebrow. No wonder. When you saw me grow up, didn't you think there was something fishy about it? Lu Jin was stunned. He looked away in a panic, retracted his hand and silently returned to the sofa to sit down. Lu Yuan had been silently watching the father and daughter. When he saw this, he got up and made 2 cups of tea. He placed one cup in front of Lu Jin and the other in front of Gunyanji. Lu Jin took the tea and slowly took a sip. The taste of this tea was very good, but it was a little bitter when it entered the mouth. After a while, the aftertaste slowly filled the mouth with a sweet fragrance. Lu Jin licked his lips and put down the teacup. He lowered his head and said, After you came back, I saw what you looked like when you grew up. I had a guess, but I didn't confirm it. What are you guessing? Why didn't you confirm it? Gunyanji softened her voice and tried not to give Lu Jin any pressure. A person like Lu Jin had a serious interpersonal disorder. This psychological disorder meant that when dealing with interpersonal relationships, he would try his best to take everything on himself. He wouldn't look for help from others and he wouldn't think from someone else's point of view. Moreover, because he was too smart and had a much higher IQ than ordinary people, he often felt lonely and unable to communicate with others. Over time, it also aggravated his interpersonal disorder. Gunyanji was one of the few people he could open his heart to care about and communicate with. The other person was Lu Yuan, but he still had reservations about Lu Yuan because Lu Yuan also had reservations about him. Therefore, Gunyanji could only choose this method to not provoke Lu Jin. Lu Jin shook his head. What does it matter? She had already passed away. If they really went to verify it, they would let others know. She's perfect and shouldn't have any flaws, be it morally or in reality. She shouldn't have to bear these things. Gunyanji suddenly understood. Her gaze sharpened in an instant. Dad, you know who my biological mother is, but you never thought of making this matter public. You wanted Qin Yaoguang to continue bearing this name, right? That was why he had lied to her during the DNA test. It just so happens that Qin Yaoguang's plastic surgery is very similar to how I look when I grow up, so you can make the best of it. This way, no one will question the mother-daughter relationship between Qin Yaoguang and me. After all, we look so alike. Other than our noses, our eyes, eyebrows, lips, and the shape of our faces are exactly the same. Lu Jin was a little embarrassed by Gu Nianji's gaze, so he could only look up at the sky. Gu Nianji saw that Lu Jin didn't say anything, so she nodded. If you don't say anything, I'll take it that I guessed right. The corners of Lu Jin's mouth twitched twice and he looked at her sideways. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't say a word of denial in front of Gu Nianji's tenacious and unyielding gaze. Those eyes looked at him like the eyes he had seen when he was a teenager when he followed his father around the hospital. The best memory in Lu Jin's heart was triggered, and he couldn't help but talk non-stop. The first time I saw her was after her car accident. I followed my father, Gu Haoze, to the hospital for a ward round and saw her. She was still a little girl less than 10 years old. Her entire body was burned, and her entire face was wrapped in gauze. Only her eyes were exposed. I've never seen such beautiful eyes before. It wasn't the appearance of her eyes that made me think they were beautiful, but her eyes. They were tough and tenacious and didn't have the fear and panic that burn patients often have. Her eyes were abnormally lively. Even though her entire face was wrapped in gauze, it didn't diminish the spirit in her eyes. Lu Jin paused at this point, as if he was trying to find words to describe his feelings. Then he said, "Her eyes were like a pair of glowing bodies. No one could ignore the spirit in these eyes. It made you think of all the beautiful things like the clear sky after a summer rain. It had the power to cleanse one's heart. It was exactly the same as Nianji's eyes." Gu Nianji, she touched her eyes. She had never thought that her eyes would be so beautiful. Lu Jin was immersed in his memories. There was a smile on his lips and his gaze was distant. It was as if he had returned to that afternoon when he followed his father down the long corridor of the hospital. My father, Gu Haoze, is a famous psychologist. He is responsible for helping these burn patients with psychological counseling so that they can overcome their fear of the fire and live a normal life. My father has counseled countless burn patients, but he was full of praise for this little girl who was burned. He said that she was mentally tough, and that she almost didn't need psychological counseling. Therefore, they were just chatting normally and didn't undergo formal psychological treatment. At that time, Lu Jin had an inexplicable interest in this little girl. He didn't know what this emotion was. He only knew that when he saw her and was by her side, he would feel safe and happy. He felt that there was nothing in this world that he couldn't conquer. He could also easily solve the difficult high-energy physics problems. He could also continue reading the foreign language original books on biological genes that gave him a headache. I often went to see her and sat in front of her bed for hours until a doctor came to change the dressing, until a killer sneaked into the ward in the afternoon when there were many people. Gu Nianji's eyes widened. Killer? At that time, there was a killer who wanted her life. Lu Jin nodded. I happened to go see her that day, and I could tell at a glance that the person who was changing the dressing in her for was not a hospital nurse. Although that person was wearing a nurse's uniform and a big mask and was very skilled, I still found a lot of flaws. Lu Jin gestured with his fingers and said, "Hospital nurses don't have gun calluses on their fingers, and they don't wear wireless headsets in their ears. They change the four while contacting the outside world." At that time, I had just become interested in electromagnetic fields, and I did a lot of small programs to test the electromagnetic fields around me. I looked at the abnormal electromagnetic signal displayed on my laptop and was sure that it came from the nurse, who was changing the dressing, so I released electromagnetic interference and turned it into sound. The nurse was wearing a wireless headset, so she must have heard a loud bang in her ears. Because her expression suddenly changed and she couldn't care less about changing the four. She covered her ears and almost couldn't stand steadily. She took a deep breath before turning around and leaving in a hurry. I only walked out of the crowd when I was sure that there were no accomplices of the nurse. At that time, Lu Jin was still a little boy less than 10 years old. No one would notice that he had just foiled a murder case. I took the medicine bottle left behind by the nurse and put it in my backpack. I called a nurse I knew to change her dressing. Fortunately, she was sleeping soundly and didn't know what had happened, Lu Jin said happily. He didn't feel any regret that he had saved someone, but the other party didn't notice. He was simply happy that the little girl didn't have to face such a terrifying situation. After I went back, I tested the bottle of medicine and found that there was a drug inside that could silently kill people from heart failure. And burn patients are prone to complications, and that is death from heart failure. If that was the case, Qin Suan would have been killed silently. I thought about it in the lab for a minute and decided to use public opinion to save her life. Because the person who wanted to kill her wouldn't just send one killer. This one failed. There were more people behind. And I was only one person. At that time I was still a child and I couldn't be by her side 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I needed to mobilize other people to make the mastermind behind the scenes retreat. So I submitted an article to the biggest newspaper in Sea City. It said that her family had been in a car accident, and that her parents would rather be burned to death to protect their daughter. I knew that this kind of touching family love was the positive energy that the newspapers at that time liked to promote. Soon the article was published and countless reporters were sent to the hospital and the traffic police to interview the accident. More details of the car accident were revealed, and it aroused great sympathy from the public. More people went to the hospital to visit her, and there was an endless stream. The hospital naturally sent more nurses to her, and they stayed by her bedside almost 24 hours a day. The result was exactly as I expected. Ever since the report caused a huge reaction in society, the mastermind behind it was very afraid and didn't continue to send people to kill her. Gunyinji listened attentively. She couldn't help frowning and saying, "You were so young at that time. Why didn't you tell your father, my grandfather, Gu Haoza, about this?" Lu Jin was stunned. "Why should I tell my father about something that I can solve myself?" Gunyinji. "So this matter has always been a battle between you and the mastermind?" The corners of Gunyinji's mouth twitched twice and she was amazed. If the mastermind behind it knew that the person who had foiled their long-planned plot was only a teenager who was less than 10 years old, she wondered if he would vomit blood and die. Lu Jin nodded seriously. "Yes, of course. They're no match for me. Although I'm not good at interpersonal relationships, my father has always taught me to do my own things and not to ask others to do them." Gunyinji smiled bitterly and looked at Lu Yuan. She could see the same meaning in each other's eyes. There were too many things you could do by yourself. This is today's third update, Chapter 1853, Do Your Own Things by Yourself. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation tickets. Today is Monday, especially recommendation tickets. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1865. Gunyinji recalled the results of her, Hua Xiaoheng and Lu Yuan's investigation. At that time, she had speculated that it was because Qin Suan's family's car accident had become a hot topic in society and caused a huge reaction. Under those circumstances, the price to pay to secretly kill Qin Suan was too high. Gunyinji said thoughtfully, the other party was very cautious and didn't want to expose themselves. That was why they didn't continue to pursue Qin Suan. Lu Jin nodded with a smile. That's what I think. If they wanted to continue the murder, the cost would be too high, and it would probably not be worth it. Gunyinji resisted the urge to roll her eyes and tried her best to be pleasant. Dad, did you find out who the mastermind was? Lu Jin shook his head without hesitation. I wasn't even 10 years old at that time. How could I be that powerful? And my specialty isn't criminal investigation. Really? Gunyinji's lips twitched. What happened after that? When you grew up and had the ability, you didn't pursue it. Lu Jin's expression became melancholic as he muttered. Later, she became famous and people from all walks of life came to visit her. Even the public relations department of the Qin Corporation's private hospital came forward and said that they would donate a sum of money for Suwan's burn treatment and postoperative recovery. Burn treatment and postoperative recovery? Gunyinji's heart skipped a beat. Does it include the cost of cosmetic surgery? Burn treatment in a broad sense includes the cost of cosmetic surgery, Lu Jin said affirmatively. Later, Suwan's burns passed the critical stage and she began to recover. After that, she was transferred to another hospital. She underwent skin grafts and facial cosmetic surgery there to remove all traces of the burn. Lu Jin sighed. After she recovered, she left the hospital and entered an orphanage. After she went to school, she was very outstanding, so outstanding that she was only slightly inferior to me. Gunyinji, it was tiring to have a father who liked to show off his intelligence at all times. Gunyinji shook her head and ignored Lu Jin's almost conceited attitude. She said in a low voice, You've been paying attention to her all these years? Lu Jin nodded, then shook his head. I didn't. I just checked her condition regularly to make sure that she was still alive and that no one was causing trouble for her. What happened next? Later, she went to university. On the first day of school she met He Qingjian. Lu Jin recalled the situation at that time and felt a little sad. He said, actually, I went to talk to her first that day, but she didn't remember me at all. Gu Nianji, have you spoken to her before? No. Lu Jin looked away unconfidently. But I always accompany her. When she's not unconscious, she'll look at me. I know she should know who I am. Gu Nianji felt that something was wrong. She opened her mouth but couldn't think of what to say. Lu Yuan said gently from the side. She has gone through so many surgeries and the recovery period for the burns was very painful. It's already good that she can survive it. What does it matter if she remembers you or not? As long as she lives well, you have no regrets. Gu Nianji couldn't help glancing at Lu Yuan. She thought to herself that it was no wonder these two completely different people could be friends for so many years. It turned out that they both had the same sad story. Lu Jin lowered his head and his shoulders slumped. He leaned back on the sofa and said weakly, "Don't comfort me. I know I'm not good enough." She made the right choice. You haven't seen He Qingjian when he was young. He was even more handsome than He Zhichu now. I think I'm also a handsome man, but I'm still a little worse than He Qingjian. Lu Jin stretched out his right thumb and index finger and gestured at a distance the size of a grain of rice. But it's this little bit that determines that I can't be with Suwen. Gu Nianji let out a long sigh. Lu Jin finally admitted his feelings for Qin Suwen. She sat over and gently held Lu Jin's hand. An extremely gentle smile appeared on her face. She said, "But you and Qin Suwen have a smart and lovely daughter. That's me, so you're no worse than He Qingjian at all." Lu Jin nodded subconsciously and grunted. Of course our daughter is more promising than their son. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Gu Nianji in horror. He said in a trembling voice, "Nianji, you even have to trick me. You're too much. Believe it or not, I'll die right now." He struggled to break free from Gu Nianji's hand and covered his face in shame as he tried to escape. In a moment of desperation, Gu Nianji couldn't care less about anything else. She flew over and hugged Lu Jin's leg tightly. She started crying. "Dad, do you think my birth is a disgrace to others by doing this? Is that why you haven't told me who my biological mother is?" Lu Jin froze. He held onto the door frame with one foot in and one foot out of the room. He was in a dilemma. Gu Nianji's grievance of not being acknowledged had been accumulating in her heart for a long time. Today it finally erupted. She let go of Lu Jin's leg and stood up from the ground. Her hands clenched into fists, she cried at Lu Jin, "Since you don't want me to have a biological mother, I don't want a biological mother. I don't even want a biological father. I was originally a test subject in your laboratory, so you don't have to be my father. I don't need it." She pushed Lu Jin away and ran out first. Lu Jin was stunned for a moment and quickly chased after her, but Gu Nianji had already closed the elevator. The number of the elevator dropped rapidly. Lu Jin was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. He slapped the elevator button desperately, but the elevator didn't stop. Lu Yuan walked out and leaned against the door frame with his arms crossed. He said calmly, "Why are you doing this? I think Nianji is right. You just think that she has a bad background and tarnishes the reputation of the goddess in your heart. You're not even afraid of death, but you've tried to die time and time again for your goddess. I won't stop you. Your own daughter can't even stand it, let alone an outsider like me." These words pierced Lu Jin's heart like a sharp thorn. Even though he was a patient with serious interpersonal disorder and could completely ignore other people's words, he couldn't ignore Lu Yuan's words. He turned around in a panic and said repeatedly, "No. I don't think Nianji has a bad background. She's my biological daughter. Why would I think she has a bad background?" "But you refuse to tell me who her biological mother is." Lu Yuan said calmly, "This is the biggest denial. Besides, are you sure you treat her as your biological daughter? A person who can't even talk to his biological mother is indeed not worthy of being a father." Lu Jin had never expected that his actions to protect Qin Suwen would deeply hurt Gu Nianji's heart. He was so anxious that he was running around in circles. "I really didn't mean that. It's all my fault, it's all my fault." Lu Jin had never felt so stupid before. His IQ, which he was so proud of, couldn't help him find a way to get the best of both worlds. Lu Jin was so anxious that he banged his head against the wall. Very quickly, his forehead turned red and a big bump appeared on it. Lu Yuan shook his head and said coldly, "It's useless for you to bang your head against the wall here. Nianji has already run out. The more you bang, the more time you waste and the further Nianji will run." Lu Jin stopped banging his head against the wall and glared at Lu Yuan. "Why don't you go after Nianji? When Hua Xiaoheng comes back and finds out that Nianji is gone, he'll definitely fall out with you." "You don't have to worry about that, shareholder Lu." Lu Yuan stepped aside leisurely and held the door handle. "I'm going to bed. You two father and daughter have a good talk. I won't get involved." Lu Yuan closed the door in front of Lu Jin. Lu Jin glared at the door and kicked it hatefully. He quickly returned to his room and turned on the GPS system on his computer to find Gu Nianji's location. It turned out that she hadn't run far. She was just staying in the park near the neighborhood. Lu Jin breathed a sigh of relief and rushed downstairs with his phone to look for Gu Nianji. His mind was still a little confused, because he had never thought that Qin Suwen and Gu Nianji, the two most important women in his life, would be on opposing sides. In order to protect Qin Suwen, he had inevitably hurt Gu Nianji. But if Gu Nianji was satisfied, Qin Suwen's reputation would be destroyed along with her death. Lu Jin really didn't want this to happen, but he couldn't think of any other way to untie this knot. Gu Nianji held her breath and ran out of the neighborhood. She went straight to the park near the neighborhood to relax. It was already late and the moonlight in the park was like a veil. The dark green trees carried a faint mist, and the air was extremely fresh. Gu Nianji took a deep breath, but the pent-up frustration in her chest still lingered. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and sat down alone on the stone bench in the park. Not far from her there was a small children's playground. In a square sand table, there was a red and green slide and two swings made of brown bark. A few children in shorts and sweatshirts were playing in the sand with small buckets and shovels. Their mother stood by the side watching them play gently. Gu Nianji didn't expect to see such a scene. Her nose ached and tears flowed down her face again. Just as she was about to continue wiping her tears with the back of her hand, a folded handkerchief was handed over. Gu Nianji followed the handkerchief and saw He Jichu standing in front of her. Gu Nianji was very surprised. She looked up at him and said, "Young Master He, why are you here? How's your father's condition?" He Jichu sat down beside her and continued to hand the handkerchief to her. He said calmly, "He's already been sent to the VIP intensive care unit. The doctors checked the surgery and said that it was done very well. There's basically no need to worry about rejection, but he hasn't woken up yet." He added, "I was worried about you, so I came to take a look." Actually, he had been waiting here ever since he had settled He Qingjian. He sat in the car until it was dark. He wanted to go back, but he happened to see Gu Nianji running out of the neighborhood. Gu Nianji took the handkerchief and sniffed her nose. She said in a muffled voice, "That person said he's fine, so he's fine. Believe me?" He Jichu nodded. "Yes, I believe you." Gu Nianji felt terrible and couldn't help crying again. He Jichu turned to look at her for a while. After a moment, he placed his hand on her shoulder. He threw the handkerchief aside with his other hand and took out a pack of tissues to wipe her tears. He said gently, "What's wrong? Why are you crying here alone?" He was as amiable as a big brother. And he was most likely her biological big brother. Gu Nianji no longer avoided suspicion. She pulled He Jichu's sleeve and covered her face. She sobbed and said, "Young Master He, tell me, is my birth a disgrace to your mother?" This is the first update of the day, Chapter 1854, The Biggest Denial. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be 2 updates today. There will be a second update at 8 p.m. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1866. Ijichu's heart instantly tightened and even his breathing stopped. He gripped the tissue Gu Nianji had used to wipe her tears tightly. He raised his arm and froze there like a statue. There was no expression on his face, and his sparkling almond-shaped eyes were as calm as the water in an ancient well. Gu Nianji waited for a while, but when He Jichu still didn't speak, she began to feel awkward. Did He Jichu think the same? It was no wonder. If her parents, who were very loving in her eyes, suddenly had a child with an outsider, even though she knew it wasn't the child's fault, she would still feel very uncomfortable. She was forcing He Jichu to ask him this. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and slowly let go of He Jichu's sleeve. She looked up at He Jichu and forced a smile. "Young Master He, don't take it to heart. I was just making an analogy. It has nothing to do with your mother." I shouldn't have spoken nonsense. Tears were about to fall from her bright eyes. They were like pearls, the first flowers of a strange flower. She was indescribably beautiful. Hijichu's heart, which had almost jumped out of his throat, gradually returned to normal. He saw that Gunyenji was still forcing a smile at a time like this, and his eyes were a little bitter. His other hand fell and pressed down on the back of her neck. He slowly pulled her into his arms and said coldly, "Don't lie to yourself. You and I both know what's going on." He lowered his head and kissed Gunyenji's forehead. "Nyenji, do you know? Why was my mother opposed to using human reproduction for genetic experiments? It was because she considered that people were different. Everyone had their own emotions and dignity. Genetic experiments used to be carried out on animals and plants. At most, the human body was cultivated with human organs and tissues. Using genetic experiments to cultivate a living person. The price was too high. She had always been firmly against it." Gunyenji's tears welled up again. She tried her best to hold them back and nodded gently. "I know. Lawyer Qin is a very outstanding and perfect woman. Her reputation is flawless. Those who like her and respect her will protect her. I was wrong." "Don't say that. My mother is a very brave person who faces reality head-on. If she knew that you were her biological daughter, even if you were born without her knowledge, she would never think of you as a disgrace. She would only make those who gave birth to you pay the price." Gunyenji buried her head in thought for a while. She would love to see Qin Yaoguang pay the price. But Lu Jin, although she said that she didn't want him to be her father, she still didn't want anything to happen to him. Gunyenji broke free from Hijichu's embrace and sat up straight. She smoothed the sweaty hair on her forehead and said in a low voice, "I believe that Qin Yaoguang has an unshirkable responsibility in this matter." Gunyenji looked up and said with a determined expression, "Young master I want to sue Qin Yaoguang for murdering Qin Suan. Will you help me?" Hijichu was shocked and blurted out, "What did you say? Qin Yaoguang murdered my mother? Impossible." "Why not? Do you still think my father did it?" Gunyenji said stubbornly, "You know he's not that kind of person. He would never hurt your mother." No, I don't think your father is the murderer either." Hijichu clenched his fists. "Actually, no one is the murderer. My mother died suddenly because there was something wrong with her body. My father put your father on the wanted list just to find out what happened. He didn't say that he was the murderer. It was only because Gu Xiangguan escaped that he was upgraded to a suspect." Hijichu couldn't bear to say this because he was afraid that Gunyenji would be even more upset. Gunyenji had already found out about what happened that year from Lu Jin, although Lu Jin still refused to tell her about his last meeting. "Yes, I know this was the result of what happened that year. But your mother's life experience and the death of your grandparents are all related to the Qin family. Don't you want to find out the truth?" Hijichu nodded. "Of course I do. I'm interrogating that person." He was talking about the person Gunyenji had found in Sea City. It was said that he was an old friend of Qin Suan's father. "It's not enough to just interrogate that person." Gunyenji's eyes were dark and her dark eyes were bottomless. "He might just be a lackey. Even if he says everything, we can't touch the Qin family at all. Our breakthrough should be Qin Yaoguang. Also," Gunyenji smiled faintly. "Didn't the US government and Congress cry out for Qin Yaoguang? Let's show the Americans what kind of person they're cheering for." Hijichu understood. "You mean a public trial?" Gunyenji nodded heavily. "My case and your case can't be tried in public, but what about the case of your mother's sudden death? I remember General he said that the case hasn't been closed yet, right?" Hijichu's mind was in turmoil as he thought about this possibility. Personally, he didn't want his mother, who had passed away for so many years, to be pushed into the teeth of the storm again. Once the trial was held in public, who knew how many dirty things the Qin family would do to protect themselves? Qin Suan had already passed away, so she wouldn't even have a chance to defend herself. However, he also knew that if he could find a breakthrough and hold a public trial of Qin Yaoguang, not only would it shut the mouths of the Americans, but it would also reverse the public opinion in the country and calm the people down so that everyone wouldn't panic and worry. Other than making him and his father, He Qingjian, uncomfortable, it would also make the Qin family panic. It would only be good for others and wouldn't be bad. He looked down at Gunyenji's aggrieved little eyes and reached out to pat her head. "Okay. But my father will wake up in 5 days. Are you confident that you can find evidence to prosecute Qin Yaoguang within 5 days? If he really wanted to sue Qin Yaoguang for murdering Qin Suan, of course he couldn't just have an idea. Whether the court could accept this case or not depended on the evidence submitted by the procuratorate to decide whether to file the case. The procurator's evidence was all obtained from the police station. After so many years, the evidence from the police station had long been handed over to his father, He Qingjian, for safekeeping. However, the problem was that none of the evidence pointed to Qin Yaoguang. It would be extremely difficult for them to sue Qin Yaoguang for murder. Gu Nianji nodded without hesitation. As long as young master He agrees, I'll squeeze oil out of a stone for her. I'm just looking for evidence. I don't believe that the Qin family didn't leave any clues after doing so many things to your grandfather. There are clues, but does this have anything to do with Qin Yaoguang murdering my mother? He Zhichu corrected her calmly. Is there a connection between the Qin family buying my grandfather's land and my mother's sudden death decades later? Maybe. Gu Nianji thought to herself, I'm sorry this time. I'll give you the presumption of guilt. Maybe? He Zhichu's expression became indifferent and extremely calm, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him and his family. What did I teach you in the past? When you go to court, you can't use uncertain words like maybe, probably, and might be. You have to speak in the language of the law. And the language of the law is the most precise, comprehensive, and logical. Gu Nianji nodded thoughtfully. I understand. Young master He, anyway, as long as you understand that I'm not trying to humiliate your mother, I can start looking for evidence. He Zhichu sighed softly and finally said, and your mother? Gu Nianji suddenly looked up, her clear eyes filled with disbelief. Young master He? You really don't mind? He Zhichu touched her face. I can't be happier to have a sister like you. Why would I mind? Even if my mother knew about this when she was still alive, she definitely wouldn't be unhappy. After a pause, He Zhichu continued, actually, when you came to my house, my mother was the one who personally brought you here. In the beginning you didn't like to see the light, see people, or talk. It was my mother who put down her work and took a 6-month-long vacation. She stayed at home with you every day and slept in the same room with you at night. In the middle of the night, when you woke up from nightmares, she would hug you and comfort you. She would wake you up in the morning, comb your hair, wash your face, cook you delicious food, talk to you tirelessly, read you stories, and tell you about the outside world. She would take you on a trip, see the beautiful scenery around the world, and find many children to play games with you. Nianji, although she didn't know that you were her biological daughter at that time, she did more for you than a biological mother. Chapter 1867. Tears seeped out from between Gu Nianji's fingers and rolled down her slender fingers. They flowed over her wrist and onto her snow-white arm, dripping all the way to her elbow. Then, they gathered at the bottom of her elbow to form a shiny oval, like a teardrop pearl. They gently dripped down and rolled on the grass, splattering like jade. He Zhichu stared at the direction of her tears for a long time before finally taking out a tissue to wipe her tears. He continued, At that time you didn't speak. My mother consulted a child psychologist and gave you a psychological test and an IQ test. They found that your IQ was very high, but your senses selectively shut off to the outside world. In other words, you only heard what you wanted to hear and saw what you wanted to see. The things you didn't want to hear or see were automatically filtered out. Your IQ was very high and your mental strength was also very strong. Your self-control far exceeded that of a child your age, but you refused to communicate with others. They said that you might have been frightened when you were young, so you used an autistic tendency to protect yourself. Therefore, my mother listened to the psychologist's advice and talked to you nonstop every day so that you could come out of your shell and see the world. As long as you were awake, she would talk in front of you and she maintained a very steady pace. Her voice was also very gentle and pleasant. Her efforts didn't go to waste. You finally reacted to her voice. As long as she spoke, your eyes would involuntarily follow her figure. But as soon as she turned around, you would immediately lower your head and hide behind the curtains. Ijichu remembered that day when he came home from school. He stood by the door with half his body hidden in the shadows of the lamp. He silently watched his mother, Qin Suwen, tidy up Gu Nianji's room and fold clothes while talking to her. After the children's story is over, she tells you the cases she fought in the past as a story. From logical reasoning to evidence collection, from debating skills to reshaping one's worldview, she repeats them tirelessly over and over again. As long as you have the slightest reaction, she will be overjoyed. She will hug you and give you a big kiss. My mother's voice was hoarse from talking. Her throat was inflamed, and her throat was very swollen and painful, but she still refused to give up for a day. Half a year passed in the blink of an eye. My mother couldn't take it anymore and fainted in your room one day. At that time there were only the two of you in the room. You walked out of the room alone, came to the door of my father's study, and told the guard at the door that Susu was sick. Gu Nianji. Susu? I called your mother Susu? Gu Nianji was very surprised. Yes. He Jichu nodded. My father calls my mother Susu. You've heard him talk about it so much that you think my mother's name is Susu. That was the first time you spoke. My father heard it from the communicator in the study. He opened the door and saw you holding your doll. You looked up at him and said very clearly, Susu is sick. My father understood and immediately came to your room. He saw my mother fainted on the floor. He called our family doctor and a specialist from the military general hospital to examine my mother. They discovered that she was only overtired and had a high fever caused by an inflamed throat. Ijichu remembered that day at school when he heard that his mother had fainted. He immediately rushed back from school, but at the door of his parents' suite, he saw doctors in white coats going in and out anxiously. Little Gu Nianji hugged her little doll alone and squatted by the door. She lowered her head and stared at the patterns on the carpet in a daze. No one paid attention to her and no one said a word to her. The 16-year-old Hijichu felt an inexplicable pain and bitterness in that moment. He walked over without hesitation and bent down to pick up the 6-year-old Gu Nianji. I'll take you inside. Gu Nianji looked up and stared at him. She said, Susu is sick. This was the first time she had spoken to Hijichu. Hijichu immediately understood who she was talking about and nodded. Yes, Susu is sick. Let's go see her, okay? Gu Nianji looked at him suspiciously for a while. She seemed to be trying to determine if his words were malicious or kind. In the 6 years of her young life, she had encountered too many people who used coaxing tones to conduct cruel experiments on her. She had shut herself away to protect herself. Hijichu looked at her quietly with undisguised heartache and pity in his eyes. Gu Nianji's small body slowly softened. She leaned her head on his shoulder and said, Let's go see Susu. I took you to my mother's room to see her. You saw her lying motionless on the bed with a needle in the back of her hand and an 4 bottle next to the bed. You immediately screamed and desperately reached over to remove the 4 bottle and the needle from my mother's back. The doctors in the room were shocked. Hijichu paused. He didn't say that his father had immediately yelled at him to carry Gu Nianji away. He continued, I was also shocked and quickly carried you away. However, you were so angry that you slapped me. Gu Nianji was speechless. She said blankly, I was too young and didn't know anything. She didn't remember anything at all, but she was familiar with what Hijichu said. She listened to him with great interest. Hijichu rubbed her head. You hated needles and were afraid of injections when you were young. Gu Nianji touched her arm and said sheepishly, I'm afraid now too. Hijichu smiled. His shimmering, sultry eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. He looked away and looked up at the sky. The moonlight was separated by sparse shadows of tree branches. It looked like an ancient window. My mother was sick. You went to see her every day, stayed by her bed, covered her with the blanket, brought her water, and even woke her up to take her medicine on time. My father was angry and amused when he heard you call my mother Susu. He asked you to call her auntie, but you refused and stubbornly called her Susu. My mother protected you. She said that you could call her whatever you wanted. What did it matter? It was just a form of address. My father joked that this would spoil you. My mother said that if you took the initiative to take care of her when she was sick, no matter how much you spoiled a child like her, you wouldn't spoil her. Gu Nianji pressed her hand to her chest to suppress her pounding heart. She muttered, Mother really said that? Hijichu nodded slightly and whispered, Everything related to you is still fresh in my memory. Because in the years when he had lost her, he had brought out these memories over and over again, and they had supported him throughout his decadent period. Gu Nianji was extremely touched. She gently held Hijichu's hand and said with admiration, Young master no brother, isn't our mother the best mother in the world? Hijichu smiled. In our hearts she is indeed the best mother in the world. Everyone's mother is different and irreplaceable. I feel very lucky to have the same mother as you. It seemed that he really didn't mind. Gu Nianji nodded. Then, please let me do one last thing for my mother. I want justice for her. Hijichu looked at her silently. After a long time he closed his eyes. Okay, do whatever you want to do. Don't worry about my father. He's not an unreasonable person. All these years he only wants to find out the truth about what happened back then and give my mother an explanation. Gu Nianji composed herself and turned her head away. She looked at the lawn not far away and said in a low voice, I remember you saying that I came to your house when I was 6 years old. For the first 6 months, it was your mother who personally brought me up. Yijichu grunted. 6 months later you started to speak, but you only talked to my mother and me. You ignored everyone else. 2 years later you were almost recovered, but that year. Yijichu paused and tried his best to hold back the sobs in his throat. Your father suddenly came to my house and wanted to see her. The two of them had a secret conversation in the study for more than an hour. After your father left, my mother was found dead in the study. Yijichu lowered his head as if his shoulders couldn't bear the burden. Her heart wasn't very good to begin with. She couldn't be stimulated, nor could she be too tired. Gu Nianji understood what Yijichu was implying. Her father must have said or done something to stimulate Qin Suwen, which caused her sudden death. Gu Nianji's eyes dimmed. She didn't want to talk about Lu Jin. She thought for a moment and asked quietly, why was mother's heart not very good? What caused it? The doctor said it was congenital. So it's hereditary? Gu Nianji was deep in thought. Then we have to check if there's a hereditary history in my grandfather and grandmother's family. Yijichu, this is today's first update, chapter 1856. You can't spoil her no matter how much you spoil her. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be 2 updates today. There will be a second update at 8 o'clock in the evening. P.S. Thank you to the readers over at QQ Reading for your tips, especially the 10,000 reading points from Superior Ling on August 3rd, and the 10,000 reading points from July, Moshi Momo. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1868. Your grandfather's family all went abroad before the founding of the People's Republic of China. Only their family stayed, and it was the same for your grandmother's family. Even now, your grandmother hasn't found a single relative. Otherwise, why would mother go to the orphanage when she was young? Yijichu shook his head. How? But don't grandfather have Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining? Gu Nianji immediately thought of Qin Jining, who had brought her over, saved her life on Snake Island, and then shot her. Where's Qin Jining? If others can't, we can at least test him, right? Yijichu thought about it. Sure, but his family relationship with mother is quite distant. Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining's grandfather was mother's paternal cousin, not biological brothers. Their father and mother's cousins were even more distant. As for Qin Jining, it's almost 5 generations. Are you sure you can confirm mother's family's history of heart disease by checking Qin Jining's condition? Gu Nianji, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Then I'll think about it again, Gu Nianji said listlessly, but her mind began to sort out the clues she had found. At that moment Yijichu's phone rang. It seemed a little out of place in the quiet park. Yijichu looked at his phone and saw that it was Xie Qingying. If she didn't know, she would let her imagination run wild again. After hesitating for a moment, Yijichu swiped open his phone and picked up the call. Qingying, what's the matter? Xie Qingying was obviously relieved. She smiled and said, Young Master He, have you finished your business? Are you coming back? I'll make you supper. Before Yijichu could say anything, Gu Nianji had already stood up and said with a smile, Young Master He, it's already very late. I have to go back. You should go home too. Xie Qingying heard Gu Nianji's voice on the other end of the phone, and her eyebrows twitched slightly. Young Master He, are you with Nianji? Yijichu didn't hide anything and grunted. Nianji saved my father's life. I'm here to thank her and her friends. Gu Nianji. Yijichu had no choice but to leave with her and escort her back to the apartment complex. The two of them were about to leave when Lu Jin, who was standing in the bushes not far from the park, quickly turned around and left. Yijichu walked Gu Nianji all the way back to the entrance of the precinct. He watched her figure disappear around the corner of the tree-lined path before turning to leave. He returned to his car and had just started it when he remembered something. He stopped the car and got out to go back to the park. Arriving at the stone bench where he and Gu Nianji had been sitting, Yijichu saw his handkerchief lying alone on the stone bench. Nearby was the tissue he had used to wipe Gu Nianji's tears. Yijichu pursed his lips and walked over. He folded the handkerchief and put it back in his pocket. He also collected all the tissues and took them to the small pond in the park. He lit them with a lighter and watched them burn to ashes and fall into the water before turning to leave. When he returned to the He residence, He Jichu went to the dining room and saw Xie Qingying sitting alone at the dining table. She was typing on her laptop and writing a work plan. He Jichu rubbed his temples and didn't explain. He sat across from her and said, "What did you make for supper?" "I didn't have dinner, so I'm a little hungry." Xie Qingying was surprised to hear that He Jichu hadn't had dinner. "You didn't treat Nianji and her friends to dinner?" "No, I had something to do. I went to see Nianji because I had some business to attend to, but found that her friend had already left. She had already had dinner, so I just chatted with her." He Jichu's expression didn't change as he said this. He was also surprised that he could lie so easily. Xie Qingying didn't say anything else. She looked up at He Jichu and smiled. "Since you haven't had dinner, don't eat this little glutinous dumpling. I'll go make chicken soup noodles for you." The kitchen had walking chicken soup stock all year round. It also added pork bones, scallops, pigeons, longan meat, and ginger. It was perfect for making noodles. He Jichu nodded and smiled. "Then I'll have to trouble you." "It's no trouble." Xie Qingying quickly shook her head. "I'll have to thank Nianji and her friends another day. We can't thank her enough for doing us such a big favor this time." "No need." He Jichu instinctively objected. "I've already thanked her. You don't know her well." Actually, he was a little worried that Xie Qingying would find out who her friend was if she interacted with Gu Nianji more. After all, Xie Qingying was the niece of Gu Nianji's friend. Although they weren't familiar with each other most of the time, Gu Xiangwen had been hiding her identity for more than 10 years. Xie Qingying didn't retort. She said gently, "Okay, if you don't want me to go, I won't go." "It's not that I don't want you to go." He Jichu was a little embarrassed. "If you really want to go, you can go." Xie Qingying wisely stopped talking about this topic and went to the kitchen to make noodles. When Gu Nianji returned to her apartment, Lu Jin immediately followed her in. He closed the door and looked at Gu Nianji. He quickly said, "I was worried about you. I didn't mean to follow you." Gu Nianji's expression was still very cold. She said lightly, "It doesn't matter if you followed me. After all, I'm your test subject. You have to track the results of the test subject, right?" Lu Jin felt very bad. He knew that he had really hurt Gu Nianji's heart. He walked over carefully and followed Gu Nianji to the kitchen. Seeing that she was thirsty and wanted to drink water, he quickly stepped forward and poured her a glass of water. "Gu Nianji, what do you want to do?" Gu Nianji sat down at the dining table. "I'm very tired. I want to go to sleep." Lu Jin rubbed his hand on the seam of his pants and muttered, "Nianji, I heard what He Jichu said to you just now." The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched. "You hid it so well." She was so agitated that she didn't notice that there was someone nearby. She didn't know if He Jichu had noticed or not, but he had said so much later. It wasn't ruled out that he had done it on purpose. Telling the truth would kill two birds with one stone. Because the key to the whole case was actually Lu Jin or Gu Xiangwen. Only if he stood up and told them the contents of the hour-long secret conversation would they be able to guide them in the right direction. However, Gu Nianji felt that Lu Jin wouldn't say it no matter what. As for why, she couldn't figure it out and she couldn't be bothered to think about it for the time being. Lu Jin actually knew that Gu Nianji and He Jichu probably wanted to know what he and Qin Suwen had talked about in that hour. He didn't want to say it because Qin Suwen had made him swear not to mention this topic to anyone again. Lu Jin hadn't made many vows in his life, but he hadn't broken his promise. Moreover, he couldn't say it out loud. Lu Jin looked at Gu Nianji's unhappy face and was at a loss for words. "So Suwen was so good to you back then. I know my decision was right." "Not wrong." Gu Nianji was furious again. "Then do you admit that Qin Suwen is my biological mother?" "Lu Jin, since you know she's my biological mother, you still want me to get engaged to young Master He? Young Master He is my half-brother from a different father. Do you know what you're doing?" Gu Nianji pounded the sofa and roared angrily. Lu Jin thought to himself, "I can answer this question." He blinked and said seriously, "In theory, relatives who are related by blood can't form a family together and have children because they have too many of the same genes. It's easier for disease-causing genes to be expressed, which will greatly increase the probability of genetic defects in the offspring, which is detrimental to the continuation of the human race. But you have perfect genes. There are no disease-causing or defective genes in your genes, and you also have a powerful ability to repair and correct errors. I've also cured He Jichu's genetic defects. Your children won't have any genetic diseases or defects, and there won't be any obstacles to reproducing." Lu Jin asked in confusion. "So why can't we get engaged?" "Gu Nianji, Damn it, this logic was so perfect that she didn't know how to refute it at all. This is today's second update, Chapter 1857, Perfect Logic. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. P.S. Readers who like, hello, Major General, can you please come to the Chidian reading app and give the characters in this book a like? If you flip back from the last chapter, you'll be able to see the characters. I've set up 20 characters. Please come and give the characters a like every day. This is free. Help the characters you like. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1869. But he's my biological brother. This has nothing to do with genes. Gu Nianji racked her brains to try to convince Lu Jin. Lu Jin waved his hand disapprovingly and said, the first survival need of a living creature is to reproduce. This is determined by biological instinct. Males have the instinct to maximize the spread of their genes, and females also have the instinct to choose the strongest genes to reproduce. In the animal world, females will choose the strongest males to reproduce, and males will also show their strengths in front of as many females as possible. It's the same in human society. Gu Nianji, she rubbed her forehead and said with a headache, you're talking about low-level animals that haven't broken away from animal instincts. Humans are already high-level animals that have broken away from these instincts. So, Lu Jin scoffed disdainfully. Humans have broken away from low-level animal instincts? You make it sound like those promiscuous men and women are very evolved. Gu Nianji, she was so tired. Discussing the issue of men and women with a sharp, smart and knowledgeable scientist was asking for trouble. She took a deep breath and said angrily, you see it so clearly, then why did you agree to do a reproductive experiment with Qin Yaoguang and use your own genes to combine with Qin Yaoguang's genes to form a fertilized egg? In the beginning, Lu Jin and Qin Yaoguang used their own sperm and egg cells to avoid legal supervision and conduct biological genetic experiments. How is that the same? Lu Jin replied seriously, we did it for scientific experiments just like donating blood. We donated our own reproductive cells for experiments without any emotional color. Gu Nianji pursed her lips. Then why don't I have a few more half-siblings? Unexpectedly, Lu Jin said with a look of disdain, Qin Yaoguang isn't as smart as me and she's not articulate. Her words are illogical and there are more defects in her genes. She's not worthy of my genes at all. So her genes and mine didn't successfully combine to form a fertilized egg. Gu Nianji, Lu Jin's interest was piqued. Actually, there's something wrong with Qin Yaoguang's egg cells. Her egg cells only successfully combined with the gardener's sperm to form a fertilized egg. Later they were implanted in the surrogate mother's uterus and implanted. When Shui was born. Tiske, this means that she is only worthy of that gardener when Dio. Gu Nianji couldn't help but want to laugh, but she didn't want to forgive Lu Jin too easily. She tried her best to keep a straight face and said coldly, then you admit that you deliberately chose Qin Suwen, the lawyer's genes to combine with you to conceive a fertilized egg? She pointed at herself, the fertilized egg. Lu Jin's face turned red. He quietly stretched out his index fingers and couldn't help but point at them for a while. He whispered, I didn't choose. I don't dare. Why wouldn't I dare? Gu Nianji raised her eyebrows in surprise. You didn't choose them? Lu Jin didn't know where to look. He stammered. I really didn't. Then how was I born? Gu Nianji's voice rose. Don't tell me you don't know. Lu Jin was forced into a corner by Gu Nianji, but he was worried that he would piss Gu Nianji off again. He didn't know what she was going to do next, so Lu Jin was really afraid of her. He looked up at Gu Nianji and met her big stubborn eyes that refused to give up. Lu Jin's heart softened even more. He turned his head away and said, Qin Yaoguang did it. I was deceived by her at first. She said that she had successfully combined with my sperm to form a fertilized egg and wanted me to carry out gene editing. Lu Jin said awkwardly and wiped the sweat off his forehead with a handkerchief. But when I started gene editing, I had to test all the sequences. Otherwise, how would I edit it? My goal at the time was to have perfect genes. I wanted to remove the non-human genes from the human genes and make up for it with the human genes. In the end, I found that the DNA on the maternal side of the fertilized egg wasn't Qin Yaoguang's DNA at all. Gu Nianji understood and couldn't help but be even more surprised. You mean you knew that Qin Yaoguang was lying, but you pretended to be confused and cooperated with her to lie? Lu Jin frowned and looked at her uneasily. He said, I told you I'm not as good as you think. I did lie. I knew that the DNA wasn't Qin Yaoguang's genes, but in the beginning I didn't know whose genes it was. I only found that person's genes weren't very healthy. Later I found out that the fertilized egg after her genes and my genes were abnormally healthy and powerful. Only then did I get a little interested and secretly checked Qin Yaoguang's experimental records. Lu Jin paused for a moment, and couldn't help smiling. Through her experiment records I found the egg cell she used, and naturally I found the owner of the egg cell. Was it lawyer Qin Suwen? Gunyanji asked coldly. Lu Jin finally nodded honestly this time. It's her. Because we wanted to treat Hijichu's illness, our idea was to use his parents' genes for research, so we had his parents' reproductive cells. Gunyanji was very upset. She said, since you have their reproductive cells, why didn't you just let them have another child to treat young Master He? Because they had already given birth to a defective child. If they gave birth to another child, the probability of a defective child would be higher, Lu Jin said honestly. So this possibility was ruled out from the beginning. You're very happy, aren't you? Gunyanji frowned. You really hid it? Lu Jin still nodded and said shamefully, I was on a whim. I thought it wasn't bad, so I gave birth to it and tried it. But I didn't expect Qin Yaoguang to personally be a surrogate mother. She moved the fertilized egg into her womb and implanted it. Qin Yaoguang claimed that this fertilized egg was a fertilized egg between me and her. No one in the lab knew. She kept her experiment records herself, but after I found out the truth, I set a fire in her lab and burned all her experiment records. Lu Jin's expression didn't change as he spoke, as if he didn't realize what he had done at all. Gunyanji was speechless for a long time. I didn't expect you to be so naughty. Lu Jin glared at her. I told you I'm not as good as you think. And I've carefully speculated that Qin Yaoguang's experiment records would only be happier if they were burned. She would never pursue the matter of who burned her lab. Qin Yaoguang was indeed very happy. Her only record was gone. Everyone thought that this child was her biological daughter. Even Qin Suwen didn't know. Therefore, Qin Yaoguang had been in a very good mood throughout her pregnancy. She didn't have the usual vomiting of pregnant women, nor did she have pregnancy spots or stretch marks. She was extremely healthy, and she didn't become ugly like other women when they got pregnant. Not only did she not become ugly, but she even became prettier. She was like a piece of unpolished jade that was about to bloom with dazzling brilliance. Gunyanji listened attentively to Lu Jin's memories and said thoughtfully, because of your concealment, she didn't know that you actually knew who my biological mother was. Lu Jin shook his head repeatedly. Of course she didn't know. She always thought that I was kept in the dark. She thought that only she and her father, Qin Bei, knew this secret. Gunyanji, Qin Bei knows too. Yes, Qin Bei definitely knows. Qin Yaoguang's things have something to do with her father, Qin Bei. Lu Jin muttered, Qin Bei should just be a good businessman and earn his money. Why is he so concerned about genetic research? Don't you understand? Gunyanji sneered. Because he didn't earn all this money on his own. He relied on the foreign financial group behind him to make his fortune. Of course he can't just earn money. Those people didn't give him money to make money for them at all. Those people are after something else. Since Qin Bei had boarded the pirate ship, he couldn't go up and down as he pleased. Lu Jin pursed his lips like a clam, afraid that he would accidentally spill the beans. Gunyanji was indeed Qin Suwen's biological daughter. What she had just said was almost exactly the same as what Qin Suwen had said all those years ago. Lu Jin's gaze fell on Gunyanji, and a trace of guilt and pain suddenly flashed across his eyes. However, when Gunyanji looked up, Lu Jin's gaze had already shifted elsewhere. Gunyanji didn't notice the change in Lu Jin's expression. She was immersed in her own thoughts and muttered to herself. Does Qin Suwen know the truth? Lu Jin's eyelids twitched. He didn't answer the question and quickly changed the topic. What does it matter if she knows or not? She's no longer in this world anyway. Gunyanji looked deeply at Lu Jin and didn't continue asking. Indeed, whether Qin Suwen knew the truth or not wouldn't help her with what she wanted to do. It might even affect her logic. Therefore Gunyanji let Lu Jin go. She looked at him quietly for a while and said, Dad, if you still want me to call you Dad, then don't stop me from doing what I'm going to do next and don't cause trouble. I don't want to see you turn yourself in or commit suicide. Lu Jin smiled awkwardly and scratched his head. I won't. But Nyenji, what do you want to do? I still want to sue Qin Yaoguang for murdering Qin Suwen. Gu Nyenji clenched her fists and suppressed the sourness in her heart. Qin Suan. My mother's family was harmed so badly by Qin Yaoguang's family. I don't believe that my mother's sudden death had nothing to do with them. Lu Jin's heart sank. Nianji, you still insist on filing a complaint? What if the truth is harder to accept than you think? Gu Nianji, what do you mean? Gu Nianji raised her head, revealing her snow-white and delicate neck like a white swan. If you want to tell me what you said to my mother at the time so that I don't have to take a detour, of course I welcome it. But if you don't want to tell me, I completely understand and won't pursue the matter. But if you don't want to tell me, don't refuse me. I'll find the truth myself. Gu Nianji clenched her fists. I believe I can find the evidence I want myself. I can convince the prosecutor's office to submit a complaint to the court. Lu Jin looked at her silently. He was sure that if he didn't say it, Gu Nianji would never know what he and Qin Suan had said on the day she died. He just didn't expect that Qin Suan would suddenly die that day. Lu Jin nodded slowly. If you want to find the truth yourself, of course I won't stop you. As long as you remember not to get yourself involved. Gu Nianji thought to herself, how could she guarantee it? But she still nodded. I'll try my best. I'll try my best to finish the file within 2 days and send it to the prosecutor's office. She would give the prosecutor's office and the court 2 more days to review it. She hoped that the case would be officially filed on the day He Qingjian woke up and a court hearing would be scheduled. Lu Jin sighed and felt very depressed. You'd better ask He Zhichu to go with you to the prosecutor's office. His identity is different, and it's also for his mother's sake. He can't stay out of it. Gu Nianji glanced at Lu Jin in surprise. Dad, I didn't expect you to be so thoughtful. Lu Jin's mood gradually improved from Gu Nianji's praise. He looked up and said, I actually know all about interpersonal relationships, but I just don't want to do it. I feel so stupid. Gu Nianji, this is the first update of the day, Chapter 1858, High and Low. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be 2 updates today. There will be a second update at 8 p.m. P.S. Remember to like the characters every day. It's best if you like the female lead, Gu Nianji, and the male lead, Hua Xiaoheng, because both husband and wife have entered the finals. Oh, asterisk asterisk asterisk. Oh. Readers of QQ Bookstore, come and like the Qidian reading app. It's free. Moi, all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1870. Gu Nianji gave up and stopped trying to break through from Lu Jin's side. This person was always telling the truth. Even if he really went to court, Gu Nianji felt that he would completely offend the judge, the jury, the people in the courtroom, the reporters, and the netizens. She had never seen a person speak in all directions without any blind spots. No wonder he was diagnosed as a patient with severe interpersonal disorder. He was really courting death. In the next 2 days, Gu Nianji began to actively look for clues to prepare her complaint. The law was about the presumption of innocence, but this time, Gu Nianji was using the presumption of guilt as a starting point to find evidence to prove her point. This was to prove to the prosecutor's office and the court. She looked at the suspicious points and clues listed on her laptop and called Qin Ziyuan first. Qin Ziyuan was Qin Jining's brother, so his words were more reliable. Qin Ziyuan was very surprised to receive Gu Nianji's call. His sometimes one-track-minded brother had committed such a big crime. If Gu Nianji hadn't finally relented, Qin Jining would have really gone to prison, and he would have had no future. Therefore, Qin Ziyuan was still very grateful to Gu Nianji. He held the phone and said politely, Miss Gu? What can I do for you? Gu Nianji exchanged a few pleasantries with him before getting to the point. Mr. Qin Ziyuan, I wanted to ask you, does your family have a history of heart disease? A history of heart disease? Qin Ziyuan was stunned. Why do you ask? As far as I know, almost no one in our family has heart disease. No one? Gu Nianji smiled. Lawyer Qin Suan seems to have a bad heart, right? I saw the doctor's diagnosis and said that her heart disease was congenital. Congenital meant that it was related to heredity, which meant that it was related to genes. Are you talking about my aunt? I think so. Qin Ziyuan didn't remember too clearly. You can ask young master He. You should know best. I've asked, Gu Nianji said slowly. He said that his mother's heart wasn't very good, and the doctor had diagnosed it as congenital. But you also said that there's no history of heart disease in your family. Could it be that lawyer Qin Suan inherited heart disease from her mother? Qin Ziyuan thought for a moment and said, if Aunt's mother's family has a history of this kind of heart disease, our family probably won't marry them. Our Qin family was also a big family before the founding of the nation. We don't care about matching each other's social status, but we will definitely prioritize the health of the other party. My aunt's father, who is my paternal cousin, wants to get married. My family won't allow him to marry into a family with a history of heart disease. Are you saying that your paternal grandmother, who is also your aunt's mother, is very unlikely to have congenital heart disease? The probability is very low. Gu Nianji actually thought so too, but she needed the relevant evidence before she could make such a conclusion. Qin Ziyuan's words could be said to be the first indirect evidence. Gu Nianji continued, "Then can I trouble you and your brother to go to the hospital I designate for a physical examination? It would be best if you can get a certificate that you don't have congenital heart disease. Can you give me another sample of your DNA?" Qin Ziyuan became vigilant. "What are you going to do? Why are we being asked to do this for no reason? Why do you want us to do this kind of examination for no reason?" Gu Nianji didn't hide it from him. "It's like this. I found something suspicious about your aunt's sudden death back then. I suspect that it wasn't a natural death but a homicide." "Are you serious?" Qin Ziyuan stood up abruptly and paced back and forth in the room. He was extremely agitated. "What clues do you have?" "I can't tell you." Of course, Gu Nianji wouldn't reveal her trump card. She said decisively, "If you're willing to help your aunt's family clear their names, then agree to my request. If you're not willing, then pretend I didn't say anything." How could Qin Ziyuan not be willing? He knew how much his father cared about Qin Suwen's family. However, they had also suffered the most. Qin Ziyuan quickly said, "Don't try to goad us. As long as there's really something suspicious, we'll definitely cooperate." Qin Ziyuan kept his word and immediately called Qin Jining to go for the examination. When Qin Jining first heard that it was Gu Nianji's request, he felt a little awkward and was reluctant to go. However, when he heard that it was related to his aunt Qin Suwen's sudden death, he immediately followed her to the hospital Gu Nianji had designated. When they received the results of the examination in the afternoon, Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining personally delivered them to Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji invited them into her house. She first took a small cotton swab and a small transparent plastic bag containing the evidence. She asked them to roll it a few times in her mouth, wet the cotton swab with saliva, and put it into the small transparent plastic bag. Then she pulled out a few strands of hair and put them into another small transparent plastic bag. After all this was done, she invited the two of them to sit down. Gu Nianji quickly glanced at Qin Jining. She saw that he had lost a lot of weight and looked a little gloomy. Although Gu Nianji didn't pursue the matter and he didn't bear any criminal responsibility, he was still punished in the army. His rank was demoted to second lieutenant. It could be said that he was very unlucky. Qin Ziyuan also sized up Gu Nianji's residence and realized that she really didn't lack money. Thinking that everything here was arranged by He Jichu, Qin Ziyuan asked softly, "Miss Gu, do you know that young master he has a new girlfriend? They might be getting engaged soon." With a new girlfriend, He Jichu wouldn't be able to take care of Gu Nianji as meticulously as before. Even if he was willing, his girlfriend wouldn't be willing. Gu Nianji nodded and smiled. "I know. Is Xie Qingying right? As long as they're happy, it's fine. Wouldn't you be more relieved that young master he is living a good life?" She tilted her head and smiled coquettishly. Qin Ziyuan saw that she didn't mind at all, so he thought that she definitely didn't love He Jichu. Otherwise, wouldn't she be heartbroken? However, she didn't love He Jichu, and she was still actively helping his deceased mother fight the lawsuit. TSK women's minds were really hard to guess. Qin Ziyuan felt a little embarrassed. He chatted with Gu Nianji for a while longer before getting up to leave. From beginning to end, Qin Jining didn't say a word. He was a completely different person from the big boy who loved to laugh and joke around half a year ago. Gu Nianji thought to herself, "I still have a barrier in my heart and you, the shooter, are depressed." She didn't take the initiative to talk to Qin Jining, but when she walked Qin Jining out, Qin Jining suddenly turned around and looked at her for a while. He said, "Do you know where Wen Shui went?" Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that Qin Jining still had a lot of feelings for Wen Shui? Oh no, if he continued to pursue the matter, Gu Nianji didn't dare think too much about it. She tried her best to remain calm and said, "How would I know? It's not like you don't know that she'll mock me whenever she sees me, and I can't help mocking her. I'm completely at odds with her. It'd be best if we never met again." Qin Jining, "I only heard that she went to America, and then I couldn't get in touch with her anymore." Qin Jining turned his head. "I don't mean anything else. I just think that maybe Wen Shui knows the best about Qin Yaoguang." You should investigate Wen Shuyi. Gu Nianji understood and breathed a sigh of relief. She thought to herself that Wen Shuyi had already told her everything she knew when she was hypnotized. However, Qin Suwen's family's past had nothing to do with Wen Shuyi. She hadn't been born yet, so there were many things she didn't know. It was unnecessary to ask her. However, Qin Jining had good intentions when he said that. Gu Nianji thanked him politely and said, "I'll think about it." "Thank you, Mr. Qin Jining. You used to call me Brother Little Ning." Qin Jining turned to look at her again and suddenly said, "Miss Gu, if young master he can't take care of you anymore, please give me a chance. I can marry you right away and let you continue to live the same life as you do now." Gu Nianji was stunned. Before she could react, Qin Jining said nervously, "Don't think that I'm just an ordinary soldier in the country. Our Qin family is still very rich abroad. I have my own trust fund. As long as I get married, it will belong to me. When the time comes, I'll transfer it all to you." Qin Ziyuan was speechless when he heard this. He quickly grabbed Qin Jining and said to Gu Nianji embarrassedly, "My brother feels very guilty about the shot he fired. He's always wanted to make it up to you. Don't think too much. He didn't mean anything else." Gu Nianji quickly said, "I know. I'm fine now. Mr. Qin's, you don't have to feel guilty. I know the culprit wasn't Mr. Qin Jining." Qin Jining looked at her deeply and was dragged away by Qin Ziyuan. They were in the hallway of Gu Nianji's floor when they were talking. As soon as the elevator left, the doors of the two suites opposite were pushed open at the same time. Lu Yuan and Lu Jin poked their heads out of their suite. Lu Yuan asked in confusion, "Did someone propose to you just now?" Lu Jin glared at Lu Yuan and said arrogantly, "My girl is talented and beautiful. Is it strange for someone to propose to her? A fair lady is a gentleman's match." Lu Yuan clicked his tongue. "But your daughter is already married. Do you want her to get married again?" Lu Jin dead. This is today's second update, Chapter 1859, Presumption of Guilt, 1. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. P.S. Remember to like the characters every day. It's best if you like the female lead, Gu Nianji, and the male lead, Hua Xiaoheng, because both husband and wife have entered the finals. Oh, asterisk asterisk asterisk. Oh. Readers of Buckle Bookstore, come in like the Chidian reading app. It's free. Moi all the big shots and little angels. Chapter 1871. Gu Nianji was already used to their daily bickering. Without looking up, she said, "No, you heard wrongly." "Heard wrongly?" Lu Yuan and Lu Jin looked at each other. "Both of us heard it. Did both of us hear wrongly?" When Gu Nianji closed the door, she smiled mischievously at the two middle-aged men. "Both of you are old, so it's entirely possible that both of you heard wrongly." Then she quickly closed the door. She was mocking the two of them for being deaf and blind, and having old age syndrome. Lu Yuan and Lu Jin's hearts turned cold at Gu Nianji's retort. The two of them looked at each other, who was old, and smiled bitterly at the same time. Lu Yuan shook his head. "Shareholder Lu's daughter is indeed extraordinary. I think she's definitely better than her master when it comes to scolding people." Lu Jin couldn't help but want to retort back, but he was in a bad mood after being called old by his daughter. Age was not only a taboo point for women over 30, but also a taboo point for men over 40. Gu Nianji returned to her suite and began to read through the medical reports that Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining had brought, especially the report on the heart. She was sure that Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining did not have any problems in this area. As for the rest of the Qin family, she could talk about it later. After sorting out the medical reports and putting them into the file, Gu Nianji took the two small transparent plastic bags and rang the doorbell in front of Lu Jin's door. She only pressed the button and opened the door to Lu Jin's suite. That was because Lu Jin had already stored her palm print and iris data in the database of his smart door lock. She only needed to swing at the door and press her palm to open the door. After entering, she found that Lu Yuan was actually cooking in Lu Jin's kitchen. The air was filled with the fragrance of delicious food. Gu Nianji couldn't help gulping and said with a smile, "President Lu is showing off again? What good stuff did you make this time?" Lu Yuan said lightly, "It's all food for older people. It might not be suitable for a young girl like you." Gu Nianji, she looked at Lu Yuan strangely and smiled. "I didn't expect President Lu to be angry. Not only will I be angry, but I will also hit people." Lu Yuan turned around and glanced at her. "You're so naughty that I want to beat you up." Gu Nianji giggled and walked over to fawn over him. President Liu, please don't say that. I know I was wrong. I won't say it again. President Liu is still as handsome as ever. The number of people who want to marry President Liu can line up from the second ring to the third ring. Lu Jin noticed that Gu Nianji had come in and quickly walked over. When he heard this, he asked curiously, why is it from the second ring to the third ring? Since you said he's so good, why are there so few people lining up to marry him? The corners of Gu Nianji's mouth twitched. Because there aren't many women who are worthy of President Liu. There are only enough women from the second ring to the third ring. Our boss Liu is not someone that just any Tom, Dick, or Harry can match up to. Lu Jin thought about it seriously and said, if that's the case, there are quite a lot of people lining up from the second ring to the third ring. Gu Nianji, she ignored Lu Jin and continued to curry favor with Lu Yuan. President Liu, what delicious food did you make? What delicious food can there be in the summer? Lu Jin said calmly, it's just loofah and egg soup. Gu Nianji looked into the stainless steel soup pot and happened to see pieces of tender loofah floating in the almost transparent clear soup. The middle part was snow white, and the golden egg blossoms were dotted with pieces of loofah. It would be very delicious with a little salt. The loofah was smooth and the egg blossoms were as tender as soup. She took a bite of the loofah with the egg blossoms around it, and it was so fresh that water could be pinched out. Gu Nianji was full of praise. President Liu's culinary skills are getting better. It's amazing to be able to make a home-cooked dish into a signature dish of a luxury restaurant. Lu Yuan clicked his tongue. Older people have bland tastes, so they can only eat home-cooked dishes. The signature dishes of those luxury restaurants are for you young people. No way. Everyone can eat it. Gu Nianji's attention was completely attracted by a simple loofah and egg soup, so she casually replied. Lu Yuan laughed. You young people are easier to deceive. Those signature dishes are meant to trick you young people. We older people only care about practical benefits. We won't be fooled by those signature dishes that are golden on the outside but rotten on the inside. Gu Nianji knelt and cupped her hands in front of her chest. President Liu, I know I was wrong. Please forgive me. I won't speak nonsense again. President Liu, please forgive me this time. When I go back, I'll praise you more in front of Ms. Song. Lu Yuan's hand, which was holding the soup spoon, paused. He still smiled faintly and said, it doesn't matter what you say. I'm not going back. Gu Nianji, she shut up at the right time, knowing that she shouldn't continue. When she went back with her two small transparent plastic bags, she saw Lu Jin watching her and Lu Yuan bicker with interest. Seeing that Lu Jin was about to open his mouth, Gu Nianji quickly went up to him and brought the two small transparent plastic bags to Lu Jin. She said loudly, Dad, look at what this is. You have to do me two favors. Lu Jin's attention was attracted by the small transparent plastic bags used for experiments. Whose saliva and hair samples are these? These are from Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining. Gu Nianji placed the two small transparent plastic bags in Lu Jin's hand. Help me check if they have any genetic defects in their genes for congenital heart disease. That's easy. I'll check right away, Lu Jin said as he took the two small transparent plastic bags and went back to the laboratory in his suite. Lu Yuan had just scooped the loofah egg soup into a white porcelain soup bowl that looked like a round bowl. The bottom of the white porcelain soup bowl had a few green aquatic plants drawn with a meticulous brush. As soon as the loofah egg soup was put in, the aquatic plants seemed to come to life and swayed in the clear soup. The loofah was snow white, the egg blossom was golden, and the aquatic plants were green. It was appetizing at first glance. Gu Nianji shamelessly followed Lu Yuan into the dining room and said attentively, I'll set the dishes. Lu Yuan let her do as she pleased. He went to call Lu Jin over for dinner. Lu Jin had already put the samples into the machine to start sequencing. Now he had time for dinner. The three of them sat at the dining table and chatted as they ate. Lu Yuan asked again, that Qin Jining just now was proposing to you, right? Why did he say that he also has a trust fund? Gu Nianji had a headache, but she had already offended Lu Yuan and Lu Jin just now, so she didn't dare to act rashly now. She said honestly, the Qin family is Qin Huichang's family. Qin Suwen's father's family was quite rich in the country back then. Their family's base was originally in the south. Hundreds of years ago, their family had a place in the 13 rows of Ji City. Oh, no wonder. Lu Yuan nodded. Qin Huichang's family has a piece of land in Z City. So it was passed down from their ancestors. Yes. Before Z City became a special economic zone, it was originally a part of G City, and now it's under the jurisdiction of Ji Province. Gu Nianji had done her homework. Because they couldn't find any problems with Qin Beiyue, she and Hua Xiaoheng started with Qin Huichang. You could say that Qin Huichang's Qin clan is the famous Qin clan in the south. If you trace back the history of Qin Beiyue's clan, your ancestor wasn't even surnamed Qin. He only changed his surname to Qin when he came to the south to work for the Qin clan. Unfortunately, everyone only knows about Qin Beiyue's Qin family now. Some people even say that they're the Qin family in the 13 rows of the country. Gu Nianji smiled and tapped her soup bowl with a spoon. Qin Beiyue never explains himself. He deliberately made the mistake. Lu Jin listened attentively and nodded. Qin Huichang's relatives immigrated overseas a long time ago. Qin Huichang's family was the only one left in the Qin family. However, after Suwen married He Qingjian did everything he could to help her find the Qin family in the country. Among them were the two brothers Qin Ziyuan and Qin Jining. At that time they were also in the orphanage, but they were in another orphanage in the south, not the Qin orphanage. He Qingjian also helped them get in touch with the Qin family abroad. The two brothers should have received their share of the inheritance. Gu Nianji replied with an, "Oh. I guess so. Actually, when Shi doesn't know how lucky she is. Qin Jining likes her very much. If she's with Qin Jining, she'll definitely marry into a rich family. Unfortunately, she doesn't like Qin Jining." Lu Jin shook his head and scooped himself a spoonful of loofah egg drop soup. She only has eyes for He Jichu. Just like her mother, she won't give up until she gets it. Lu Yuan was relieved and said, "I don't think Qin Jining has good taste. This kind of person has a problem with his IQ. Nianji, you have to see it clearly." Gu Nianji pursed her lips into a smile and said, "Thank you for the reminder, President Lu." After the three of them finished dinner, Gu Nianji returned to her suite to continue sorting through the files. Lu Yuan came to her room with a cup of tea and asked with a smile, "Is there anything I can help you with?" Gu Nianji glanced at him and said carefully, "President Lu, you're not angry anymore, are you?" Lu Yuan waved his hand and said with a smile, "I was just teasing you." Gu Nianji, she sat back behind her desk and asked as she typed, "President Lu, where do you think I should start with the presumption of guilt?" She already had the Qin family's medical report, but this would at most prove that Qin Suwen's congenital heart disease was untenable. Lu Yuan thought deeply and said, "I still remember that Qin Suwen's heart didn't seem to have any problems before the car accident." A thought suddenly flashed through Gu Nianji's mind. "What do you mean by there was no problem before the car accident? Do you have her medical report before the car accident?" Lu Yuan shook his head. "It was decades ago. How could there be a medical report from that year? I heard it from your father. I remember that it was lawyer Qin Suwen who suddenly fainted in the car on her way back from a court appearance. She might have been too tired. After she was sent to the hospital, the diagnosis was that she fainted due to a congenital heart disease. Her blood supply was insufficient, so she fainted. When your father found out about this diagnosis, he muttered for a few days. He said that if Qin Suwen had congenital heart disease, she wouldn't have survived the car accident, much less the burn recovery treatment after the car accident." When Gu Nianji heard this, it was as if she had been enlightened. She let out a loud, "Ah," and said in surprise, "I know where to start." This is the first update of the day, Chapter 1860, Presumption of Guilt 2. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. There are 2 updates today. There will be a second update at 8 p.m. P.S. Remember to like the characters every day. It's best if you like the female lead, Gu Nianji, and the male lead, Hua Xiaoheng. The link is in the author's speech at the end of the chapter. Readers of Buckle Bookstore, come and like the Chidian reading app. Moi, everyone, little angels. Chapter 1872. Lu Yuan saw that Gu Nianji had a clue, so he stood up and said, "Then I won't disturb you anymore. Get ready." After Lu Yuan left, Gu Nianji spent the whole night writing the complaint and supplementing the evidence she wanted to submit. After carefully checking all the materials, it was already dawn outside. The morning light shone through the gap in the curtains. The study facing the south was shimmering, and it shone on Gu Nianji's pretty face, which had been up all night. However, she wasn't tired at all. Instead, she was full of energy, as if she had gotten plenty of rest and sleep. She could be said to be excited, and a faint blush appeared on her cheeks, like the pink in the most delicate rose's heart. Gu Nianji read the complaint from beginning to end again, then took out her phone to call Hijichu. She wanted to ask Hijichu to go to the procuratorate with her to submit the complaint. In the past, she wouldn't have bothered to do such a thing, but this time was special. She needed to get the procuratorate to approve her complaint as soon as possible, and at the same time, get the court to accept her complaint and file the case. Because murder was a criminal case, if she wanted to seek criminal punishment for Qin Yaoguang, she would have to get the procuratorate to prosecute her. An individual could only file a civil compensation lawsuit against Qin Yaoguang related to murder, and could not directly file a criminal lawsuit. The phone rang a few times but no one picked up. Gu Nianji looked at her watch. It seemed to be too early. It was only 5 in the morning. The procuratorate started work at 8 o'clock, but Hijichu still needed time to read through the complaint and the evidence she had collected. It would take at least 2 to 3 hours, so Gu Nianji knew that it was too early to disturb Hijichu, but she still braced herself and called him a few times. Hijichu still didn't pick up. Gu Nianji thought about it and dialed Hijichu's office's landline. There was someone on duty 24 hours a day. Even if Hijichu didn't pick up personally, his operator, his orderly, and his personal secretary would pick up. As expected, someone picked up the phone very quickly and asked politely, "Hello, may I know who you are? Why are you looking for our chief? I'll record it down and give it to him when he comes to work." Gu Nianji quickly said, "Sorry to trouble you. I'm Gu Nianji. I have an urgent matter to discuss with Major General Hijichu. Can you please wake him up now? It's really urgent." The person who answered the phone was Hijichu's orderly. He immediately said, "Okay, I'll help you wake up the chief now." He knew how important Gu Nianji was to Hijichu. Although they had already broken off the engagement, Hijichu still instructed them to inform him immediately if Miss Gu wanted to see him. Therefore, everyone in the He residence treated Gu Nianji with respect. The orderly arrived at Hijichu's bedroom and rang the doorbell. After a while, Xie Qingying opened the door. She was wearing a tight long-sleeved nightgown and asked with sleepy eyes, "What's wrong? What's the matter? It's only 5 in the morning." The orderly politely said, "Miss Xie, please call the chief. Miss Gu has something urgent to talk to him about." Pausing for a moment, he added, "It's urgent." Xie Qingying, she poked her head out to look. "Gu Nianji? She's here? Where is it?" Miss Gu didn't come. She called the chief's office. Xie Qingying nodded. "Got it. I'll ask the chief to call her back." "Okay, thank you for your trouble, Miss Xie." The orderly saluted her. Xie Qingying smiled faintly. "It's my duty." Closing the suite door, Xie Qingying looked down at Hijichu's phone in her hand. She couldn't open this phone but she could still answer calls. Gu Nianji had called Hijichu's phone several times just now, but Hijichu hadn't woken up. Xie Qingying had woken up. She saw that Hijichu had only returned at 2 in the morning yesterday and was too tired to wake him up. He had only slept for 3 hours so she couldn't bear to wake him up. She hadn't expected Gu Nianji to call Hijichu's office again. Was there really something urgent? Xie Qingying pondered whether to wake Hijichu up. Just as she was walking to the bedroom, Hijichu's phone rang again. Perhaps Gu Nianji had called at the right time. The orderly must have told her that Hijichu would call her back on his phone. She couldn't wait so she called again. Xie Qingying picked up the phone and said softly, "Is this Nianji? I'm cousin Qingying." Gu Nianji was slightly taken aback, and her face quickly turned red. She said embarrassedly, "Cousin Xie? Can you let young Master He answer the phone? I have something urgent to talk to him about." "Okay, he's still sleeping. He only came back at 2 in the morning yesterday and only slept for 3 hours. I'm sorry for what happened just now. I wanted to let him sleep a little longer and call you back at work." Xie Qingying said with a smile, but there wasn't much apology in her tone. Gu Nianji also knew that she was in the wrong for calling someone at 5 in the morning, so she quickly said, "Cousin Xie, I'm sorry. This is the last time. I really have something urgent to talk to you about. I won't call young Master He so early in the future." As long as she could file a case immediately, Gu Nianji really didn't need Hijichu's power anymore. Her only wish here was to clear the name of Qin Suwen's family. Xie Qingying smiled and said gently, "I know. If it wasn't for something urgent, Cousin Nianji wouldn't have disturbed us so early." Xie Qingying pushed Hijichu and said, "Young Master He, there's a phone call. It's urgent." Hijichu was indeed very sleepy. He had been interrogating that person yesterday, but that person's knowledge was really limited. There wasn't much information that could be obtained, and there was no new information. After being woken up by Xie Qingying, Hijichu was a little grumpy. He turned his head childishly and hugged his pillow. "I'm not answering." Xie Qingying found it funny. Her eyes curved as she held back her laughter and continued to push him. "It's Nianji's call. You're not answering?" Hijichu instantly woke up. He suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. He looked at the alarm clock on the bedside table and frowned. "Give me the phone. It must be urgent to call so early." Xie Qingying handed the phone over and said considerately, "I'll go to the kitchen to make breakfast for you. Wake up early and see what's going on with cousin Nianji." She was indeed a little unhappy, but she knew the severity of the matter. Gu Nianji must have had something urgent to do to look for Hijichu. She could understand that. After Xie Qingying left, Hijichu wiped his face and picked up the phone. He asked, "Nianji, what's wrong? What happened?" Gu Nianji had heard the entire conversation between Xie Qingying and Hijichu. She was a little embarrassed, as if she had peeped into someone else's privacy. Her face burned as she stammered, Young Master I finished my complaint. I wanted to ask if you were free today. We'll send the complaint in as soon as the procuratorate opens in the morning." "Young Master do you want to read the complaint first and then come with me to the procuratorate and court?" This was the first time Gu Nianji had gone through the back door. She asked with trepidation, afraid that Hijichu wouldn't be willing. Fortunately, Hijichu wasn't unwilling. He agreed immediately and said as he put on his clothes, "I'll be right there. Don't worry. There's no car on the road now. I'll drive to your place in 15 minutes. Gu Nianji quickly nodded and thanked him. "Okay, thank you, young Master You haven't had breakfast yet, have you? I'll go make you a sandwich." The kind of sandwich that only needed to be heated in the microwave was one of the few foods she could make. Hijichu grunted. He didn't care much about what he ate. After putting on his clothes, he went to the bathroom to brush his teeth and wash his face. Then he came out with his car keys. In the living room downstairs, he met Xie Qingying, who had just come out of the kitchen. She was holding a tray of food in her hand. When she saw Hijichu coming downstairs, she quickly said, "Young Master have some breakfast before you leave." Hijichu waved his hand. "It's too late. I'll go to Nianji's place to eat." With that, he left without looking back. Xie Qingying looked at the food on her tray and smiled bitterly. She shook her head and sent the food back to the kitchen. She said to the orderlies in the kitchen, "Sorry to trouble you, but young Master has already gone out. You guys can share this breakfast. It's all freshly made. It's clean and no one has touched it." "You're welcome, Miss Xie." A few orderlies in the kitchen quickly thanked her and happily took the tray to eat. Xie Qingying had no appetite at all. She went upstairs to get her bag and left the He family's house. It was a summer morning in the imperial capital. The air was still very fresh and cool, and there were not many cars on the road. Xie Qingying drove alone, wondering what was going on with Gu Nianji. She regretted suggesting that she go with Hijichu to take a look. With Hijichu's current status, it was not appropriate for him to appear directly. Actually, she could help Hijichu do things. That way, even if something went wrong, he could blame it on her and not make things difficult for Hijichu. As Xie Qingying thought about it, she turned the steering wheel and drove back. At the same time, she called Hijichu to ask if she could go over to see Gu Nianji with him. This is today's second update, Chapter 1861, Presumption of Guilt, 3. Please give me your monthly votes and recommendation votes. P.S. Remember to like the character every day. The link is in the author's speech at the end of the chapter. Readers of QQ Bookstore, please come and like the Chidian reading app. Moi, all the big shots and little angels, that you're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.